He was part of the Rebel Alliance and let them blow him away with the Death Star. No Brits was involved, no fingers could be pointed.
You carry on taking the medication, George. Yes, I'd send all the Labour government to space with a one-way ticket and throw in the SNP for being useless. They're all a bunch of... Oh, all right, fair enough.
One person, quite frankly, I think needs to go to space in a one-way journey is Jeremy Kyle. He goes on about his age one more time, how he's 60 this year, he was 59 last year, repetitively over the course of the weeks and months. We have to hear him, I'm 60 this year, I'm 60 this year.
Richard Tice, did you put that cheeky bugger up to that?
I'm hoping he's going to send me the invoice because that was absolutely brilliant.
Which MP would you send to space?
Oh, no, I'll get in terrible trouble if I answer that. But it's fair to say there's quite a long list.
The sad thing is about sending people into space on a one-way ticket is I don't think that we've built a spaceship big enough to take the lunatics off this planet. I mean, from the net zero loonies to the transgender loonies to the racists to the terrorists, there is just so many to the wokerati. We need some big spaceships.
Big spaceships.
Good evening. I never know how you're going to start this conversation, Jeremy.
Katy Perry went to space today, OK? Who would you send... I'd love her to say what I wanted to, but I'd never disrespect her. Who would you send to space who could never come back?
Well, I'd be happy to send Ed Miliband to space, I think.
Oh, that is an outrageous question, so I'm not even going to answer that question.
Sam Matterface, do you get the job, yeah? Come on.
No, Sam Matterface, I tell you what... There's no.
I think David Lammy would be the person I'd want to send up in space and never come back again.
Yeah, the problem is how much would the bill be for him to munch through whatever food on the way there?
Hey, it worked.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome to Morning Glory. It's 3 minutes past 6. It's Monday morning. It is June the 16th, and we are back. It is the beginning of another very busy week here at Talk, and we're going to be here with you all the way through it. 4 glorious hours this morning of Morning Glory, and a podcast to follow, which you can get your hands on around about 10:15. Where to begin, ladies and gentlemen? Obviously, last time we were here on Friday, the hostilities had really just begun overnight with Israel attacking Iran. They've been attacking each other all the way through the weekend. They've been attacking each other with some deadly force, it has to be said. Talk this morning that the chief of Iran's military intelligence unit has been killed. Also stories about Donald Trump apparently putting the mockers on a plan for the Israeli government to go after the supreme leader of Iran. Apparently Donald Trump vetoed that. We'll find out about that throughout the course of the day. We'll bring the latest from Israel, where an awful lot of Brits seem to be trapped as well. There's no commercial flights going in and out of the region, certainly none in and out of Israel. It's still a very dangerous situation. We'll keep you abreast of all of it, of course, right here on Talk, not only throughout this show, but throughout the next 24 hours and the next 48 hours, and on and on and on it will go. We said on Friday this is not going to be a one-time hit. It's going to be going for a while, and it certainly looks as though, unless the Americans intervene, it'll be going on for the rest of the week. Meanwhile, we've got Keir Starmer. He's over in Canada. Flew over there over the weekend to meet Mark Carney. There's a G7 meeting going on. That's been sort of thrown into disarray as a result of what's happening in the Middle East, because everybody's focused on that. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer keeps pretending that he's going to be getting a trade deal with the USA, even though he said before we already had one. Back at home, of course, before he left, there was a massive story because Keir Starmer, believe it or not, has done an incredibly massive U-turn. Once again, telling us one thing and doing something else. Because who can forget when he said this?
Calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right. And that affects politics because a robust debate can only be based on the true facts.
Yeah, that was when he didn't want to have a national inquiry on the rape gang situation in this country because he said there'd already been one. He also said there was going to be a load of regional ones instead, a load of local inquiries, because what we don't need to do is jump on a far-right bandwagon. Well, I've got some bad news for you, I'm afraid, if you're a supporter of Keir Starmer. He appears to have jumped on a far-right bandwagon because he's now decided he wants to have a national inquiry into grooming gangs. Front page of the Daily Mail, Starmer in full retreat over grooming gangs. After an inquiry U-turn, he now orders a probe by Britain's FBI. Well, what could have possibly changed? We'll be asking that question over the course of the next 4 hours. Also, the front page of The Sun goes a completely different way. They've got a great story about the BBC. A bullying investigation has rocked BBC Breakfast. Apparently, the atmosphere on BBC Breakfast has become toxic. Naga Munchetti and Charlie State have fallen out, even though they sit next to each other on the sofa. Boss Richard Frediani has been accused of tyrannical behaviour. There's nothing like that here. This is Morning Glory. It's all sweetness and light, man. Welcome. Good morning. Yes, I mean, that'll probably come back to haunt me, you know, as people start putting in, you know, bullying accusations into HR throughout the course of the morning. But I don't know I mean, let's kick off with breakfast, because BBC Breakfast, I know that the big story is obviously going on in the Middle East, but just for a bit of light relief, I suppose, for people who don't want to have the brains battered in from minute one. Bullying probe at BBC Breakfast, an exclusive by Clemmy Moody. Great story, this, in the front page of The Sun. It's the latest BBC bombshell following the Hugh Edwards scandal, the Strictly probe, and the axing of Match of the Day's Jermaine Jenis. It's not been a great few months for them, has it?
No, it's been the BBC's annus horribilis in every respect.
Yeah, and we haven't even mentioned Gary Lineker yet.
And what I love, of course, is that you mentioned Jermaine there from The One Show, but you know, The One Show, BBC Breakfast, the image they want you to think about is Ovaltine and marshmallows.
That's
you know?
right.
It's supposed to be so lovely. We're all loves and babes and everything like this.
Absolutely.
And behind the scenes, it's a viper's nest, apparently.
Apparently so.
And Naga Muchetti, I mean, gosh, you know, I'm sure no viewers will be surprised to find out that she's fallen out with one of her colleagues.
Yes.
Virtue signalling Empress-in-Chief.
Yes. Although I'm told as well that Charlie State is quite a difficult customer from those people who know him and those people who work him. It looks as if they walk onto the set having had a special assistant to pull the knives out of each other's backs before they sit down.
Well, if that's the case, maybe they deserve each other, I
think that's possibly true.
But the biggest story, I think, is actually this Frediani chap, who is the programme's boss.
Yes.
Now, when I first read the highlights of this and glanced at it, I thought, you know, the accusations against him, whether he was shouting at people when they did the wrong thing or spoke out. And I thought, here you go, more snowflakes.
Yeah.
They just can't handle being in the workplace and encountering the real world. But the more you look into it, I mean, these are all allegations, but, you know, allegations that he actually shook somebody, a woman, a low-ranking female editor, when he was angry with her. That
shook her?
That complaint, physically shook a low-ranking female editor, shook her.
Crikey.
Yes. And that complaint was upheld. And so there are lots of these sorts of things. So who knows what the truth is, actually. But it just goes to show, you know, despite everything that's happened at the BBC, these sorts of things and allegations still carry on.
I know. Well, funnily, I think it was some months ago that this story first kind of reared its ugly head, and there was some suggestion that that both of the presenters, Charlie and Naga, had basically stopped talking to the editor of the programme, so that when he was giving them instructions through their earpieces, as people sometimes do on television, they were just ignoring him. And you can't run a TV show like that, can you?
That's not ideal. Well, it goes to show, actually, I think that aren't their ratings slipping at BBC
Well, of
Breakfast?
course they are.
Yeah.
I mean, BBC are losing.
If they're not speaking to their editor, this perhaps may be one of the reasons.
May have something to do with it. Last night, another BBC insider defended Frediani, saying, yes, he is a bit of a perfectionist, but he's very well liked by many. He is aware of all the issues and believes he will be vindicated. In a recent interview, Naga insisted that she and Charlie were, in quotes, good friends.
Good
it's
friends.
never a good look, that, is it?
Yeah, I think that's what Starmer says about Macron as well, isn't it?
Now, here we go. Complainants alleged they were shouted at when mistakes were made on air, while one person witnessed Frediani walk out of the production gallery and kick a bin. My goodness, that's bad, isn't it?
Well, that's what I mean. That's why you sort of think
certainly shouldn't happen.
Maybe these are all these are all Cassandras and Poppies who have never actually been shouted at in their lives.
Tension. I suppose it's the only good reason to watch the show. Really, they break out, start fighting each other. Tension between the pair is right. Anyway, that obviously is a very much more frivolous story than the ones that we're going to be covering this morning, because obviously in the Middle East, Trump says full might of US ready for conflict is what it says on the front page of the Times, and the RAF on standby to defend Israel on the Eye, page 1. I mean, it's not clear how long this is going to go for, but certainly it's doing some real damage both to civilian casualties in Israel and to military casualties, certainly in Iran. And I think Netanyahu has been at pains to point out that, you know, they're not targeting civilians in Iran. And in fact, there are some people on the streets of Iran cheering and watching as the bombs fall down, right?
Yeah, exactly right. And although it is, of course, it's going to be very worrying that the Iron Dome is a bit more porous than it was last time, and some things have got through. There are 60,000 British nationals also in Israel. The British government cannot repatriate them because the airspace over Israel is closed, as are the land routes out of it, so it's very, very worrying also. But as you say, that's one of the reasons why the RAF are actually in the area and will be happy to help out if they need to stop those things coming through. And but America being quite clear here, we're not involved in any way in this. They don't want to escalate the crisis, but threatening Iran to be careful, otherwise if any American does die, then they will face the full might.
Yes, although of course Trump, according to the front page of the Daily Telegraph, did veto a plan to kill the Iranian leader. The Israelis deny that, but it'd be interesting if that turns out to be true, because he obviously doesn't want to. I mean, I saw the Israeli ambassador, I think, to London being interviewed at the weekend, and she said, you know, our policy here, our prize here is not regime change. We just want to make sure that they can't make a nuclear bomb.
Well, and this is a really interesting issue in terms of the geopolitics here, because it is one of the goals of Israel to have regime change. And you've had Netanyahu saying, we want to stop them having a bomb, but we also want to encourage the Iranian people to rise up. Now,
yes, what I'm saying is that the Israeli ambassador to Britain said on Sunday, actually, regime change is not our plan.
Well, of course, that's not what Netanyahu said, and I think that may be because of words that they've had from America, and the reason that Trump vetoed this. You know, regime change, when the West tries to do regime change in the Middle East, doesn't tend to go very well.
Does it? No.
As loathsome as Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi were, they had a big stranglehold over religious extremists, and of course, no one can say that Iraq and Libya became more stable and more secure after they were expelled from office. The difference, of course, is they've already got the religious extremists in place in Iran anyway, but of course at least they are a clear government. If Iran basically dissolved into internecine fighting, it's very difficult to see that Iran would be a more stable place, and this is one of those dangerous things. There's no history of democracy in Iran. Before that they had the Shah, so the idea that if you had the people rise up that they would be replaced by some democratic government, I think is for the birds. Although you might just get terrorist leaders actually being more radical than the Iranian Revolution. So it's a very, very complicated situation.
And indeed, and I saw I think the surviving member of the Shah's family, who's, I think, is it Reza Pahlavi?
Reza Pahlavi.
Who's in London now, and who said, look, you know, as far as we're concerned, you know, he's been saying for 40-odd years, you know, he'd be happy to go back, not as, you know, the sort of crowned emperor, but to have actual proper elections, and to stand for proper elections. But again, democracy is easy to say, not so easy to achieve.
But monarchy is the solution to the Middle East, and this is the big thing, you know. The Americans, unfortunately, because of their whole history of getting rid of the British monarchy, Madeleine Albright was asked about this in terms of Afghanistan, for example. There was a guy called Zahir Shah, who was the last king of Afghanistan. He abdicated. He was the one person who could have united the country. He was still called the father of the nation up until his death. And Madeleine Albright said, we don't do kings. A familiar phrase from the Trump protests we saw yesterday. But that's the issue, because there is no democratic history in the Middle East, but they do understand tribal leaders and they understand monarchy. And the most stable countries in the Middle East are the monarchies.
Well, you see
they're not the
republics of Saudi Arabia, the crown princes of various Emirates and all the rest of it, Oman as well, Qatar even. You know, they get on better, don't they, that way?
And so bringing
whether
back,
we like it or not.
So bringing back Reza Pahlavi as the new Shah of Iran, I think would be an excellent idea with democratic checks there. But he's a human rights campaigner, and what's really fascinating is if you go to the pro-Israel marches that we've seen in London and around the world, you have the Israeli flag and you have the old royal flag of Iran flying by its side with the famous lion of Iran. So that goes to show you that. So in terms of Israeli-Iranian relations, there'd be a huge increase there, because you've got to understand one of the reasons Iran wants to destroy Israel under the Shias is because they are a doomsday cult who run it, and they believe you won't get the Mahdi, which is the Muslim Messiah, will not arrive until Israel has been eradicated and those lands have been reconquered by Muslims Muslims. So it's actually, it goes beyond negotiations over the nuclear powers.
You can't
in the
just
West,
sit down around a table in Switzerland, can you?
This is fundamentally about religion, not politics. And I think people in the West don't actually fully understand that.
Well, there was a fascinating moment, actually, when Reza Pahlavi was being interviewed by Laura Kunzberg yesterday, where she was practically speechless, open-mouthed, when he started to suggest that he was actually in favour of the Israeli attacks on the theocracy of Iran. And she was like, sorry? She was like, excuse me? You know, thank goodness you're here, Rafe, to explain all this, because it's quite frankly shocking to me that some senior people in broadcasting, like Laura Kunzberg, wouldn't have known that. You know, how can you not know? You know, they've obviously got this guy on in the hopes that, you know, he'll condemn Israel, which is, of course, what the BBC loves to do.
And you would have hoped after 9/11 and all the catastrophe in Iraq and going into Afghanistan, people in the West would make more of an effort to do some proper research into understanding the core issues at play here. Not least, of course, that all these Iranian Shia extremists are desperate to get their 72 virgins. No one's told them that the 72 virgins are all spotty incels called Norman.
No,
but that's the reality.
They're all too busy bullying each other and stabbing each other in the back of the BBC to do any real research. Sky, for example, over the past 24 hours has done nothing but replay the words of the Iranian government spokesman about how dreadful Israel is and how they're committing war crimes all over the place, and this is just another one, you know. But you wouldn't know.
And the Scottish First Minister put out a statement essentially condemning Israel and linking Gaza to what's happening in Iran right now.
I know.
I mean,
it is quite extraordinary. Let's have a look at Rachel Reeves. She was doing the rounds yesterday. We've got quite a lot on her this morning, of course, because she was talking to various people yesterday about all manner of things, including the rape gangs, including you know, her own particular problems in the Chancellor of the Exchequer's office. But here she is talking to Trevor Phillips on Iran.
I've got no time for the Iranian regime, for the repression of their own people, and we have serious concerns, which we've expressed on a number of occasions, about the Iranian nuclear programme. But we want to see de-escalation at the moment. We are not trying to ramp up the rhetoric. We are very concerned about the developments in the Middle East because of the implications here at home, but also the implications for the Middle East.
What about the subjugation of the British people by the Labour government? I mean, is any thoughts on that particularly? You know.
Well, I'm so glad she told us that she has no time for the most evil regimes. My God, they'll be quaking in their boots over that.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? It is absolutely incredible. Rachel Reeves also on the front page of the Telegraph today, preparing plans for a tax rate on dividends in her autumn budget and hunt to find tens of billions of pounds of revenue. So just in case you're running a small business and you were wondering if there were actually going to be any dividends, if there are any, she's going to tax them.
Yeah, and of course many people have restructured their businesses in order to take salary through dividends as well. Yeah. So there's some justification for it, but of course for most people dividends are, you know, a vital way of topping up the income that's being taken out in every other way.
Yeah, it is incredible what they're doing. I mean, they're literally destroying the economy one step at a time, you know, and every chance they get to improve that, they just seem to take the wrong option, don't they?
Well, unfortunately, we're only into the first few months of this government, and that's the great cry. I don't know what it's going to be like in 4 or 5 years, because it looks like it's just the latest growth forecasts are so depressing.
Yeah.
It's very troubling
really
times.
It's dreadful, absolutely dreadful. We are here, though. It's 18 minutes past 6. It's Morning Glory. We've got lots more to come, including a look at what Keir Starmer's been wearing when he was in Canada over the weekend, and also him unveiling some Father's Day cards. We'll take your views on that as well. This is Talk.
there's no doubt that he meets the honours criteria of being at the top of your profession, but also as a global icon in sport and fashion and public appearances, he meets the criteria of enhancing Britain's reputation on the world stage, which is just as important. And of course his charity work with the King's Foundation and 20 years as a UNICEF ambassador, that meets the honours criteria of voluntary service and philanthropy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:20. I'm Mike Graham. It is Monday. We are at the start of yet another week, ladies and gentlemen, the 16th of June. Hard to imagine we're halfway through. Apparently it's going to be a great week, by the way. The first time ever this year, I think we're going to actually have a really, really nice hot week. And that's what, of course, we're being told here in London and the South East. So apologies once again to anyone up north in Scotland or anywhere else where you're not going to get that. But it's going to be like Spain here, apparently, we're told. Let's get a voice note from Liam on Kent County Council.
Good morning, Mike. Liam in Folkestone. So apparently Kent County Council have been paying for asylum seekers' TV licences. Well, a few months ago, it was my freedom of information that actually exposed them for paying for their driving lessons. I've also got two that came back to me as to whether that they were paying for their council tax and their mobile phones, and their response was, it's not in the public interest. Well, I think it is, because you can bet your bottom dollar Kent County Council and councils across the country have been doing the exact same thing. Anyway, have a great week, Mike. Cheers, mate.
Thank you very much indeed. And no question at all that it is in the public interest to find out exactly what our councils are spending money on, particularly given the fact that they're not spending the money where most people would like them to spend it, on refuse collection, on fixing the potholes, on sorting out schools, on sorting out all manner of things. Yeah, I mean, Kent County Council, according to Azia Youssef at the weekend, is using taxpayers' money to pay for TV licences for asylum seekers. Remember that next time you are asked to pay for yours. That's what he said. I wonder if they're watching you know, the BBC as a result of this. I mean, why are we buying TV licences for these people? It's just incredible. They're here illegally. They might as well just watch TV illegally. What's the difference? What's the point of buying a TV licence for them? They're doing everything else illegally, for heaven's sake. Meanwhile, of course, we get the news from the Mail on page 8. 1,500 migrants crossed in literally the last 4 days alone. The weather's been pretty nice. I was down the south coast at the weekend. The sea was relatively calm. We're just going to see thousands and thousands more people coming over the next few months, aren't we?
Yeah, especially over the next 10 days or so, because we're going to have a sort of a mini heat wave here. The seas will be calm. And just to put it into some context, you know, in the 1980s and 90s, our total net migration of legal people coming over was 50,000 a year.
Yeah.
50,000 a year is now the number that come here illegally. That tells you exactly how dire the situation is. Clearly, this whole idea of smashing the gangs, as we've been saying for the last 2 years, I've been saying smashing the gangs doesn't work. Matt Goodwin has shown this as well. You stop one gang, it's like a multi-headed hydra.
Yeah, right.
Two more pop up in its place. Clearly, none of this is working. You need to get the French to do their job. The Belgians go into the waters and stop the boats in the waters.
Yeah.
The French refuse to do that. They say maritime law prevents us from doing this.
But according to Keir Starmer, that's what the French were going to start doing, but they're not doing it.
So, well, there's supposed to be an agreement now that the French will go into the waters and stop the boats, except the French unions have come in, and the French unions said, oh, no, health and safety.
Yeah.
So now, once again, it's the trade unions who apparently are the big bloc stopping the French from doing the job for which we are paying them handsomely. And as I've said before, if they don't want to do it, let's send our boys over and we can do it. They were very happy for us to come over at Dunkirk. You know, it's about time that they repaid the...
Instead, we've given a 480 million quid for the absolute result of nothing happening at all. Let's talk about the far-right bandwagon, though, because it's time for Keir Starmer to jump on it, it would seem, because here's what he had to say just a few weeks ago.
Calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right, then that affects politics, because a robust debate can only be based on the true facts.
Yeah, and of course the true facts are that Keir Starmer's now changed his mind, because that was only a few weeks ago, I think it was in April, when he didn't want to have a national inquiry into rape gangs. He said, one, we've already had one, and it took 7 years, and then he said, secondly, we're doing a lot of local inquiries, which have never really come to anything, and suddenly now he wants to have a national inquiry. My suspicion is that he wanted to announce it before this report comes out, which has been commissioned by the government, because the report is actually going to recommend it. So he's going to try and make it look as if it was his idea.
Exactly. I think he said it, you know, literally hours before the report comes out. So that's not a coincidence at all. I'm sure also part of the reasoning may be, of course, that you've seen the reform vote going so strongly, and of course the Red Wall are very strong on these issues, because of course it's Rotherham and Rochdale. These are the centres of what is the biggest scandal of the 21st century, and I think that's all part to play in it. Not to mention, of course, Rupert Lowe has his own inquiry going on as well. So I think you've got all these multi-pronged things
he's
happening.
announced that he wants to have an inquiry. I don't think he's actually started it yet.
Well, I think they're doing some initial work on it, actually. But anyway, the point is, you know, Keir Starmer could have actually led this as soon as he became Prime Minister, with the status of being head of the Department of Public Prosecutions. He could have said, we are going to take action where the Tories didn't. There would have been huge support for him. You know, I'm sure a big tranche of votes that would have gone to Reform would have stayed with Labour, because they would have felt he's on our side finally. Yet again, petrified by political correctness, but even more, this was a huge cover-up by Labour, because I don't think enough people talk about this. There's a wonderful whistleblower called Roger Mia who has spoken about this, how the Labour councils, Labour-run councils in all these areas were actually covering up all of this to save community tensions, but also to save the vote of the Muslim vote. They didn't want the Muslim vote to leave Labour, so they said, look, you might have some, you know, Muslim councillors, but we, the Labour Party, are the only ones in government who can actually look after your interests. And it got to the point, Roger says, where actually you had Muslims gangs going around and taking postal votes from people who just signed the postal votes, and they were given to the Labour Party, essentially. This is the allegation of Roger Mia, and the reason that they covered up the grooming gangs was because they didn't want any of this exposed. If the inquiry came out, it would expose, it would lift the rock, and you will see quite how putrid and petrid the politics in the north of England is.
Well, that is exactly what this inquiry, at the moment, as far as we know, is not destined to do, because, you know, we heard from Rachel Reeves yesterday. We've got a clip of her in a moment, which I'll play in a moment, where she just keeps repeating mantra-like, well, of course, you know, the most important thing here are the victims. Actually, yes, of course the victims are important, you know, but you don't just have to say the victims are important. You have to say that what's really important is who's responsible for the cover-up.
Exactly.
Because the cover-up, in many ways, is even worse. Because I saw a young woman interviewed yesterday on one of the TV channels, who was talking about not just, you know, individual rape gangs in places like Oldham and Doncaster and Rochdale and Telford, but actual, you know, rackets where children, young women, were moved from one place to another. So it was almost a conspiracy, more than it was a criminal conspiracy, more than anything else, because these people were actually trafficked from one town to another and handed to one gang and then another gang and another gang when they were 13, 14 years of age. And so this inquiry, whatever it is going to need to look at all of that. And you're absolutely right to say it. It will uncover some pretty horrible truths, home truths, for the Labour government and the Labour Party.
Yeah, we had county lines for young girls. This is exactly what was happening. And it's undeniable that one of the reasons that the Labour government wanted to have local council inquiries is because they knew those councils wouldn't do a proper job and would cover it up, because they would be basically checking their own homework. And of course, they are the guilty parties. So some of the people implicated in the grooming gang scandals ended up being Labour activists themselves. One of the worst ones, a chap sickeningly called Daddy, is in prison now for being one of the great orchestrators of all of this. And it goes far wider. I mean, even yesterday I watched BBC 10 o'clock news in the evening, and they had a story on one of the grooming gang survivors, one of the rape gang survivors, and I thought, oh great, this will be very, very powerful stuff. I watched it. It was about 2 white men who groomed her.
Of course.
And I thought, really, and we know that Casey is actually going to identify Pakistani Muslim men as being at the core of this.
Of course.
And yet the BBC couldn't get beyond their little, you know, virtue signalling messaging at such an important point when we're going to finally get an inquiry. But the devil is in the detail, and unfortunately this is going to be a time-limited inquiry. So I do actually have have grave reservations that one of the reasons Starmer may now support it is because it's not going to be the proper inquiry you used to have in terms of the length. And I think you do need to have a full inquiry, because this is such a terrible stain on our country. It's such a big issue, and it goes so deep that and we need to see how long this time limited is going to be.
Absolutely. But I don't think there's any doubt that the amount of pressure that was piled on Starmer, not least from viewers and listeners to this show who needed it and wanted it, people who said by voting for reform at the last elections, in the local elections, you know, overwhelmingly that's what they wanted sorted out. You know, they're not interested in Keir Starmer's mealy-mouthed words about, you know, oh, it's not necessary, we don't need to do it. Let's have a look at what Rachel Reeves said about it all yesterday to Trevor Phillips.
I'm quoting here, and misinformation. And those who were more or less accused of racism for raising this issue?
The most important thing is getting justice.
Well, no, this is what I've asked you is the most important thing.
Well, no, Trevor.
For many people who were criticised in that way.
Trevor, what is the most important thing
of
here?
Course,
it is
the position of the victims. I understand
the victims,
that.
And it's not people's hurt feelings about how they've been spoken about.
So she's saying it's not about people's hurt feelings. So it's not about the fact that Labour have consistently stymied any kind of change in the law, have stymied any kind of attempt to go, as you say, under the bonnet of these northern councils to find out who was covering what up. You know, the fact that she now thinks it's all about the victims. I mean, the barefaced lies of this party are quite remarkable.
No, I mean, the attempt there to dismiss, you know, people lost their jobs over this.
Yeah.
You know, Sarah Campion, the Labour MP, who tried to speak out at Rochdale. I mean, the war of cancellation and persecution of the truth tellers. You know, I've been calling for a national inquiry for 5 years. So it's not just Labour. You know, the Tories don't come out of this well at all, because this all happened under their watch as well. It's been going on for decades. In fact, it's still going on. Lots of people treat this as if it's an old issue, and so for her to say that is so disgraceful and despicable. I mean, I didn't think she could sink any lower in my estimation.
Oh, don't worry. She's got several rungs to go yet, you know, because it's quite remarkable how they can be so barefaced about it. This is the thing that I think people are astonished by, because every single tweet that gets put out now by Keir Starmer is just attacked relentlessly. And I know that Twitter is not the real world and everybody says all that, but, you know, the depth of feeling about this man and his inability to connect with the British people is really a worry, I think, for him, as much as it is for the whole country.
Yeah, this is a man who has
he's completely out of touch.
He's got no political instinct, and, you know, and he's supposed to be a prosecutor. That's the thing. He came late to politics. He's a lawyer, not a politician. But even as a prosecutor, he's failed on this issue of the rape gangs. And I think it's just something which, hopefully, I would like to see resignations. I'd like to see criminal charges brought against those people who covered it up. And it's not just the councils; it's the police. West Yorkshire Police I think is the most despicable police force in the country, and it's also social care. It's all of these areas. Every institution failed, and they sacrificed.
And they all knew.
They sacrificed young working class girls on the altar of political correctness. And once again, it's the working classes who have to bear the brunt and pay the price for mass immigration. And I hope this also ties in the Casey report into the consequences of mass immigration.
There's no question that the Casey report will connect the two things, which is why he's terrified, because he now knows that somebody in an official capacity, not just a journalist, not just somebody with a television programme or a radio programme, not just the voters, but actually somebody that he's appointed, has come to this conclusion independently that there is an absolute definite link between mass illegal immigration and sometimes legal immigration and attacks or sexual attacks on young women.
Well, we've had a quadrupling of rape in the last 10 years in this country. And, of course, that's the same time we've had a rise in mass immigration. We know that 77% of rape convictions in Paris are foreign nationals. 92% of thefts on the metro in Paris are foreign nationals. This is this applies to Western Europe. Doesn't apply to Eastern Europe. Why? Because they don't have mass immigration. And we've imported culturally incompatible peoples who have brought into this country abhorrent cultural practices. It's not just rape gangs. We're now the global centre of acid attacks. You have honour killings in this country, gangs of youth wielding machetes. I don't recall that when we were young. Honour killings, child marriage, forced marriage, cousin marriage. All of this is going on. We all know it. We all talk about it on this channel, and yet our political class, once again, are about 10 years behind the times.
He's finally bowed on this one, but will it be enough? That's the question. We'll take your calls and your voice notes, 0344 499 1000. Just before the break, though, let me show you picture, a tweet that Keir Starmer put out. He's almost sitting on his own on a plane, which looks like, I presume, a private plane. I don't know whether it is. He went off to Canada for the G7. But he's holding two Father's Day cards, and if we can see it, there we are. And he says, I found these hidden by my kids in my suitcase this morning. Happy Father's Day to all. Now, one of them says, I'm glad you're my dad, and the other one says, number one dad.
Were they written in Ukrainian?
Well, I don't know. They were certainly written. I don't know if they were written before he got on the plane. It's just the thing that amuses me so much is the fact that basically his underneath any one of his tweets are all kinds of just ridiculously funny responses, because nobody believes it. People are saying, "Well, didn't you pack your own bag?" You know, or did you? If these were in the overnight documents that you're supposed to have in your red box, do your children have access to that? It's supposed to be highly secure. You know, all of that. And again, most people just think he's put this out as a PR stunt. They just don't believe it. And that's the problem. With everything that he does, he seems to not actually get it quite right.
Everything is performative. This is up there with Gordon Brown saying he loves the Arctic monkeys.
Yes,
it's the same sort of thing. And what kid doesn't want to see the joy on their father's face when they open up a card? So why don't you just hide it away rather than give it to him in person?
Before he goes away for another Father's Day, not at home, I'm afraid. There we are.
Yeah, maybe they don't know where he lives.
Yeah, 6:35. This is Morning Glory. Back after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to 6:37, I'm Mike Graham, and Rafe Heidelmanku is here, of course, helping us through the papers. Morning, Mike, says Shawnee Gloucester. This may be a silly question, but why does Kent Council buy TV licences for immigrants? Don't the hotels have TVs anyway? Just imagine the waste Zia Yusuf and his team could uncover on a national level. Well, that's a very good question. I don't understand why they'd be doing that. Good morning, Mike. Looking forward to a great show. I've had a news-free week in glorious South Devon, so there's probably a lot to catch up on. So far, it all sounds very depressing, especially seeing that Keith Starmer is still in number 10. Sue from Essex, keep up the good work. And Rachel says, what a relief to listen to some balanced news reporting on the Israel-Iran conflict this morning. If I read or hear any more reports about unjustified attacks by Israel on Iran, I'm going to scream. Well, that's what you get, I'm afraid, from what you might call the mainstream types in the BBC and Sky. You know, you have to switch it off after a while. You're just kind of going, you know, is there any chance of you actually saying that Iran is a clear and present danger, not just to us in the UK, but to the entire world? Because these are the people who have been bankrolling Hamas, bankrolling Hezbollah, bankrolling the Houthis as well, and causing all of the problems, some of them anyway, certainly in this country, when it comes to spying, when it comes to terrorism, all the rest of it. You know, and yet lefties are kind of busy going, well, you know, Israel really has overstepped the mark here, you know, attacking another country when they shouldn't. I mean, come on.
Yeah, well, you made all the points. It's not just, of course, about Israel and Iran. Iran's got its tentacles in this country as well. You know, anyone who's an Iranian journalist who criticises Iran and lives in this country fears for their life. We had an attempted kidnapping, you may remember, recently as well. Same thing's happening in Canada and in America as well. and yet the left simply can't bring them to defend anybody who is an antagonist of Israel.
Yeah.
Of course, they're completely, these people were still completely silent about, Saudi Arabia bombing Yemen, all these other things that not much is spoken about. As soon as Israel gets involved, suddenly it's always, my enemy's enemy is my friend.
There's any number of atrocities they could be looking at any given time around the world. They just don't bother. Let's have a look at Keir Starmer in Canada, though. He's over there, as I say, for the G7. This is another kind of bizarre video that went out yesterday. He appears to be wearing a pair of trainers, and Mark Carney's wearing a proper suit, and he seems to be sort of dressed as though he's just gone to watch his kids play football. He's got a very odd dress sense, hasn't he?
Well, he's been taking lessons from David Lammy on footwear, clearly.
Yes.
I mean, look, I've got problems with my ankles, so just in the last month I managed to find dress shoes that look just like Mark Carney's, but they're actually trainers. But you can't tell the difference. So you can get them without having these things as if he's just gone down the shops to do the school run or something like that,
Yeah, he's obviously got a fashion consultant, because he dresses as if he's like about 50 years younger. I mean, that's the thing. It's the same with Andy Burnham. Andy Burnham shows up for a press conference looking like a member of New Order. He doesn't like wearing shirts, so he wears a sort of a round-necked affair, which he sort of thinks it takes 20 years off his life.
I think that explains Starmer's haircut too. It's for very much sort of Beverly Hills 90210.
Yeah, I know.
Jason Priestley.
It's very strange.
It's your first shot with another world leader, G7. It's a serious place. He's there at the Prime Minister's residence in Ottawa, and dressed for the occasion, for heaven's sake.
Exactly right. Now, a couple of other stories to mention, not related to Keir Starmer or G7. MI6 has named an insider as its first female leader after a rival for the role was criticised for being too soft on China. This is a woman called Blaise Metriweli, 47, a Cambridge University graduate who once rode in the boat race. She's currently Q, by the way, in an act of sort of, reality imitating fiction, because, of course, James Bond had Judi Dench as the head of the MI6. Now we've got our own version of that. But the thing that I find intriguing about this story is that the appointment of this woman who will now be known as C, head of the Secret Intelligence Service, beat out somebody called Beijing Barbara, which I love.
I love that.
They've got Beijing Barbara, who apparently was the UK ambassador to China for quite a few years, who's missed out on this job.
Yes, Dame Barbara Woodward, who was seen to be a bit too soft, as Ian Duncan Smith put it very diplomatically, less than robust in her dealings with China.
Yes.
And of course, this was at the same time that you had Cameron and Osborne having the new golden age of relations with China. Look, we never had an M from James Bond. C is the term we really use, but there is a real Q, and she was Q, so maybe she'll be bringing some of her gadgets into meetings now, passing a pen to the Chinese.
The pen that explodes.
and see what happens. But she seems like she's very qualified. Doesn't look like she's married as far as I can see. So she's obviously been dedicated to her job.
Yes.
Held some very high-profile roles. Also speaks Arabic, which makes me very sort of reassured that she's a serious person who can actually understand as we were discussing things like Iran. You want someone who's got that sort of an insight there. Not the first woman, of course, that we had Dame Stella Remington and Baroness Manningham Buller in the past. But interesting that there were two women shortlisted. So I don't know whether there were any men shortlisted or if there was any DEI stuff going on there.
I don't know. I mean, you might have seen, I think it was it the week before last, I think certainly made Plank of the Week, was it MI5's boss who came out, who has he, him in his pronouns, and he came out and said that they were going to fly a pride flag from the Vauxhall headquarters of MI5, because that's really, what we should be doing. We don't wish, people's sexuality to be a barrier to being a spy and all this kind of stuff. So hopefully she's not going to be quite as carried away with all that as he was.
Well, that's going to make the Chinese and the Russians take us much more seriously.
I know, can you imagine? I'll tell you what's a really interesting story, which I haven't seen before, and I'm going to look into it later on in the show. Front page of the Telegraph here, civil servants allowed to spy on bank records. Apparently there's a new bill going through, a fraud bill, which is currently going through the House of Lords, in which basically civil servants will be able to snoop into your bank account and even remove money, extract funds if they reasonably believe that the money is owed. Now, supposedly this is all about public sector fraud, and it's meant to be giving civil servants the ability to look into companies and look into individuals in that arena. But clearly it can be misused, surely.
This is actually, it's always the very seemingly innocuous pieces of legislation that are the most serious.
Yeah.
We can talk about everything else. It's stuff like this. This is the real heart of Starmer's Labour.
Yeah.
control, authoritarianism,
surveillance,
giving powers only held by the police to low-ranking civil servants to snoop on your accounts, take money out of your accounts without a court order. This is the thing. There's not even any judicial oversight, and they won't have even an independent chairman looking at it. There's no actual accountability here whatsoever, and this is the beginning of the the social credit. You know, this is just what the Chinese have.
We're going to talk about that later on the show as well.
Well, you've done something. You've tweeted wrong on this thing. You've spoken out about this issue, so you won't be able to get any petrol from the petrol pumps, or we'll just go in and freeze your bank account.
And if you've got an electric car, we can just make it stop. I mean, that's the other thing that people worry about. There's also all sorts of stories. We'll come back to this. Well, the other thing that I found extraordinary when I read it is that apparently if this does go through, your bank won't even be required to tell you that the government have asked questions about how, what your money situation is.
Precisely. And we've already seen elements of this in Canada, remember, when you had the truckers who were opposing the COVID vaccines.
Yes.
They had their bank accounts frozen completely. We've already seen, of course, with Nigel Farage what happened as well. I think, and the best way to silence opposition is through our wallets. Because if you cut off people's ability to pay their bills or feed themselves, nothing has a more chilling effect on free speech than that. And this is one of the pathways in which they can subtly get about doing it.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of, the ability of sort of, centralised government to do things, there's a story in the Times on page 2 saying terrorists could hijack AI-driven vehicles to carry out mass casualty attacks without the need for a suicide bomber. This is a warning report coming from the United Nations. I mean, it obviously makes quite good sense if you think about it, but we'd be talking about bringing driverless cars to Britain within the next year or so, according to our lovely new, relatively new Transport Secretary, as soon as next year, driverless cars. But, this is a risk that nobody's really talked about before.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's considered it. And we always think technology means great times, one wonderful progress. Of course, the internet was going to be the most wonderful creation of all time. Of course, it's led to the fracturing of society, the darkest corners. We now hate each other.
I'm so glad you said that. Nobody's actually said those words, but you're absolutely right. The internet is to blame for an awful lot of the problems we have now.
Absolutely.
No
we wouldn't be divided at all without the internet. But also, AI now. And they even say that the cars and will be able to use facial recognition to actually target individuals as well. And the thing about AI is fantastic in many respects, but there's also quantum computing, which people don't talk about enough. Now, quantum computers are the other big radical transformation, and they can break any codes. So a quantum computer can hack into any AI car. Even the CIA and the FBI said that their security passwords and codes could be broken in seconds by this new generation of quantum computers. So we're into a very, very uncertain future.
Well, can you imagine as well? I mean, we've got another story in the Telegraph saying that basically our enemies could weaponise the weather, that they could dim the sun, all the things that Ed Miliband wants to do. They could sort of prevent solar panels from providing any sort of energy whatsoever. Similarly, we were told by the Ministry of Defence only a few weeks ago, and I don't know why people didn't get more worked up about this, that if you're driving an electric car, we won't let you park it anywhere near a Ministry of Defence facility, because its ability, particularly if it was made in China, because its ability to snoop on you is actually dangerous. So why we're allowing Chinese electric cars to be even driven around anywhere in Britain is a mystery to me.
Yeah, there should be no Chinese technology in this country. Remember, we were going to give them 5G. We were going to have them do our nuclear power plants. I mean, again, the level of myopia, is it willful blindness or simply incompetence or duplicity? It's unbelievable that you're going to give our enemies these sorts of things. But I did laugh about Britain's enemies may dim the sun. I'm not sure we'd noticed it in this country if they actually did it. But one of the ways they're doing it is also to stop global warming. They spray aerosols into the atmosphere to deflect the sun. Now, when we were young in the 80s, aerosols were the ozone layer. Now that's the solution. It was harming us. Now it's actually the solution. I don't know. They're making it up.
We've gone full circle. Well, I had a bit of an exchange with Dale Vince at the weekend, in which he told me that water was somehow an endangered resource. And I was like, well, the world is made up of mostly water, so I'm not really quite sure where he got that one from. But he's been bleating on about how, the weather's been hot, so hot, one of the hottest springs we've ever had. It's time we could stop eating meat. It's time to stop flying anywhere. It's time to start taking care of the planet and all the rest of it. And I mean, these people are just insane, aren't they?
Well, actually, there's one area which technology may come to save us, and that's they've now been able to do
desalination.
Desalination.
Yeah.
And so we know most of the world is water. So
I said this years ago. People were like, "Oh, that's a great idea. Why don't you put salt water on the fields?" I was like, "Do you not understand what desalination is?" You know, people actually are that thick in this country. In the photo of Starmer wearing the trainers, I noticed he's not wearing a wedding ring, says Vern in Southampton. Where's Starmer's wedding ring with the photo of his trainers? I don't know. Maybe he never had a wedding ring. I've no idea. We'll have to look into that. Let's get a voice note from Brian on rape gangs.
Morning, Mike, from Southend. Another sunny Monday morning. So, Starmer, another U-turn, flip-flop here. You know, once again, you know, he's going on what Reform said should be done. You know, in the last few weeks, you know, the amount of U-turns he's done, and they've all come because of policies by Reform, or what Reform has said they'd do. He's actually copying because he's petrified. Him and Reeves are petrified. They're done for. You know, and this is probably the last straw because people now know. You know, he was calling us all far right. All those who want an inquiry, national inquiry, were far right. And Reeves hasn't even got the audacity to apologise for calling people that. You know, saying, oh, it's not really important that people will call names. Now suddenly it's important that all the young girls get sort of justice done. Well, it ain't going to wash.
It ain't going to wash at all, Brian. Thanks very much indeed for your thoughts. Here's one from Carl in Shrewsbury. I notice our esteemed comrade leader has scurried off to the G7 to avoid the immediate fallout from the Casey report. This inquiry he's announced needs to destroy the lives of the people involved in covering up. They need jail time and revocation of any pensions. A message needs to be sent to all that you do the job you're paid to do. You don't call people racist for highlighting a problem, and you certainly don't call children who are being raped prostitutes. Great show as always. Carl, thank you very much indeed. Coming up, we'll find out how much money the government wants to spend on fixing bridges and tunnels, believe it or not, and also how they're planning to run the national grid without any gas for the first time this summer. You might want to get some candles in. 6:51.
Rachel Reeves, all of the cabinet, they go, oh, well, you know, we're reporting on, they've got no answer, because they don't know. But I do. They're going into social houses, they're going into council houses. So British people who have lined up for years to get their social housing, council houses, will have to go to the back of the queue, while these foreigners who broke into our country illegally will go to the top of the queue. That, ladies and gentlemen,
unacceptable.
That is modern Britain.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course, this morning. Julie Hartley-Greer will be there too. Rafe Heidel-Manku is here with us. This one will please you, Rafe. I know we like to do these whenever we're doing Plank of the Week. Woke madness continues, according to a Sun online story. Classic Shakespeare play slapped with a trigger warning because it features violence and death. And you might not be surprised to know we're talking, of course, about Romeo and Juliet. Sir Ian McKellen has apparently hit out this ludicrous warning that's been placed on it. This is let's see what's the version of it where it's going on. It comes 4 years after the Globe in London warned of upsetting themes in the play. I remember that. I think they made Plank of the Week back then. But this one, I think, is somewhere else. I'm not quite sure where it is, but University of West of England slapped over 200 trigger warnings on Shakespeare's work, including bad weather in The Tempest.
Well, given that Romeo and Juliet were about 14 years of age as well, should also
Yes.
be underage too. You can stick that.
Oh, this
on
is at
there.
the Royal Opera House. Sorry, finally found it.
But I mean, what's next? Are they going? You know, that's compulsory reading when you're in secondary school. You know, is Romeo and Juliet. What are we going to? You know, Red Riding Hood. Was that the next one? You know, Hansel and Gretel's pretty gruesome.
It is. Well, they're all grim, as they say, aren't they? Absolutely right. Let's talk about this story in the Telegraph, page 17. The grid to run without gas for the first time. It's, again, this kind of obsession of net zero. Britain's electricity grid operators will attempt to keep the country's lights on without burning gas for the first time ever this summer. I mean, first question would be, why? Why do they want to do that?
Well, also they're lying because actually they won't be producing gas domestically.
Yeah.
So actually, still around 12 to 18% of power comes from abroad, and that's still going to be gas-based anyway. So even they are actually being quite disingenuous here. But what I love about this story is that they're trying to say that UK is leading the world here, and they say very proudly only a few other countries have decarbonised their grids. The other two being Lesotho and the Democratic Republic of Congo. So it's good to know that we're up there with the A-list.
Yeah. So when everybody says, you know, why are we leading the world in this? You say, no, it's not just us. It's also Lesotho and the DCR, or DRC, rather. I mean, it is incredible, isn't it? But there's this kind of zealotry that they've got about doing it, as if it makes any difference to anybody. And the only likelihood is that there'll probably be blackouts, because we are not a reliable source of energy on our own without our own gas.
And you just have to look over the channel at the French with envy, you know, such low energy prices because they invested in nuclear.
In nuclear, exactly.
Never forget Clegg saying, you know, oh no, 2030, we will, these power plants won't come into play until 2030. Well, we're almost there now. Thanks a lot, Nick.
Well
highest energy bills in the developed world.
Absolutely ridiculous. The Mail on page 15 has got a story saying that basically we're going to spend £1 billion, or Rachel Reeves is going to spend £1 billion of our money fixing bridges and building tunnels. I mean, the problem for the traffic in this country, as I learned to my cost yesterday, is that there's way too much of it. And you're not going to get any sort of improvements in the road system, or you know, in the general sort of administration of the country's, you know, main road network by just building more roads. You can't. You're just going to have to limit the numbers of people here.
Yeah, well, I think actually fixing our infrastructure, I think, is a critical way of showing that we are actually dealing with our country.
Yeah.
If we want to have a productive economy, if you want to drive growth and so forth, you do need to ensure that we have up-to-date infrastructure. You can always tell a country that's on its last legs by the state of its motorways and highways and so forth.
And I noticed that in America, actually, under
America's
Obama.
terrible.
You know, because when I first moved there in the 80s, it was really at the forefront of what you would call the technological revolution. The road system was great, you know, everything was really good. And now it's kind of fallen down around its ears because they just haven't looked after it.
All of North America, in the 60s and 70s, you know, North America was the golden standard for the whole world, and it was so proud of its motorways and everything else.
Right.
Now, of course, Europe, China, of course, which, you know, 30, 40 years ago was nowhere, now has the slickest, sleekest transport systems and everything else. That helps the economy hugely, but also, as with Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his New Deal, great way to get people employed.
Yeah,
as long as we can, don't have
absolutely.
as long as we don't import them to do it.
Well,
but
that's the bit where we got wrong. But more than half of this £1 billion is going to go to one project, which is the Lower Thames Crossing. So once again, people will say, well, it's just about the southeast of England, isn't it? Because that's going to be somewhere east of the Dartford Crossing, which is the big bridge that the Justice Bullock climbed up, and it's involved the construction of a 14.5-mile road linking Kent and Essex through two 2.6-mile tunnels under the Thames. It was first supposedly going to be built in 2009. We've already spent £1.2 billion on it, and it's not finished.
So actually it's only 500 million for the rest of the whole country.
For the rest of the country.
London gets far too much, although I do hope Hammersmith Bridge will be one of those bridges that's going to be fixed, because...
Well, the trouble is, of course, the eco-nutters don't want to reopen Hammersmith Bridge because they like it a lot better now that there's no traffic going over it. And that's part of the problem as well.
I'm surprised you haven't got Joanna Lumley wanting it to become a new garden bridge.
Oh, I know. Absolutely right. And I suppose we should mention the Trump military parade, just for good measure, just before we go, in about a minute's time. A lot of protests about Donald Trump not being their king. You know, I thought when I first heard it, I thought, is that Republican lot now decided to go over to America and start, you know, demonstrating against King Charles? No. Apparently it's people in America who don't want a king, they say. All very silly.
And the irony of that, the Democrats saying no king, but they wanted to essentially anoint and insert Kamala Harris into Joe Biden's role without anything at all.
I know.
So,
as usual, hypocrisy reigns. Rafe, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Rafe Harlemaker will be back, I'm sure, later on in the week, right here at Talk. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to be talking a great deal about the grooming gangs and why Keir Starmer now thinks that it's OK to completely U-turn on his previous position on the right-wing bandwagons. This is Talk. We'll be back after the news. We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino?
Right? Yeah, a rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field." Put your foot down, this rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the Magpie, which is much bigger.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to 3 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham. It is Monday the 16th of June and it looks like a beautiful day already. So if you're not up and at them yet, you should really be doing so, because there's a lot to talk about, a lot to discuss, much to get stuck into this very morning. We're into the second hour of Morning Glory. We'll be here with you, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock. First of all, we've been talking a lot this morning about the doings at the weekend between Iran and Israel. The fighting continues. The missiles are still flying. There's been some serious damage done to parts of Israel, both in terms of its civilian population in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem. There's been a setting on fire of the Haifa oil refinery as well. Meanwhile, Israel has continued to target military bases and ballistic missile sites in Iran. The belief is that they wanted to try and assassinate the supreme leader of Iran, but were vetoed from doing that by President Donald Trump. Also, of course, we know that they think that they may have killed the leader of the Iranian intelligence organization as well. But the fighting continues, ratcheting up any of these escalated talks and escalated businesses that are going on over there, of course, are still the order of the day. We're being told by Keir Starmer's brigade that they think that there should be a de-escalation of the hostilities. But, of course, Keir Starmer wasn't even told that there were going to be any hostilities before they happened, which is a pretty good indicator of how low this government is seen by the Israeli government. They told the United States of America, obviously. They didn't bother to tell Keir Starmer that they were about to launch an attack on Iran, and that's how far Britain has sunk, I'm afraid, in terms of its international reputation, certainly with regard to relations with what is supposed to be an ally country in Israel. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer's accused of doing a massive U-turn on the front page of the Daily Mail this morning. Starmer's in full retreat over grooming gangs. This is the man who said just a few weeks ago, we don't need a national inquiry into the grooming gangs. We don't need anything other than a couple of local inquiries. We've already had one national inquiry, and worse than that, if you do want to have a national inquiry, you're some kind of bigoted right-wing maniac. Have a listen to what he said.
Calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right, then that affects politics, because a robust debate can only be based on the true facts.
Yeah, and so now we're going to have a robust debate because Louise Casey, KC, has decided that she's going to put a report out in which she'll recommend a national inquiry. So he has said that they will now have a national inquiry. Completely barefaced, completely changed his mind, complete volte-face, in fact, and yet he thinks he can get away with it. 0344 499 1000. Over at the BBC, meanwhile, according to the front page of The Sun, there's a lot of bullying going on BBC Breakfast. Absolutely shocking story. Stick with this breakfast show. There's no bullying here. Absolutely everybody gets on like a house on fire. 7:06. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Welcome to the non-bullying breakfast show right here on Talk. We're going to speak to Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International, in 1 second. Morning, Mike. Regarding Keir Starmer and his Father's Day cards, he needs to give them more pocket money. Those cards are 99p from the card factory. Perhaps they should have gone to Lord Alley for a better quality card, says Rich in Dublin. In Dudley, rather. Morning, Mike. How forced is that smile in Starmer's PR photo? I reckon that was take 15. What a PR stunt. The tragedy for Keir Starmer right now is that everything he does is simply not believed by the British public. He's put out a picture of himself on a plane saying he's opening his 2 Father's Day cards from his kids and how happy he is. There he is. Thank goodness you're my dad, or something is what it says. And nobody believes it. And that's the level of credibility that this Prime Minister has. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not anymore. Nobody believes a word he says. Let's talk to Isabel Oakeshott. Isabel, very good morning to you.
Morning. He just looks so weird and creepy, doesn't he?
I know.
What is going on with his expression?
And the fact that I mean, some of the messages I'm getting are extraordinary, because of course he's claiming that he discovered them in his case, and people are going, well, why are you discovering things on a plane in your case? Does that mean you didn't pack your own case? Does that mean that they were in some government box that they shouldn't have access to, your children? You know, nobody believes a word he says. That's where we are.
I think he failed that bit of check-in where it goes, did you pack your own case?
Exactly. I know. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. But, I mean, I know it's a couple of days old. There's a couple of things to catch up with from the weekend. I was absolutely horrified when I saw that story, I think it was on late on Friday or early Saturday, that Britain was not even consulted or told by Israel before they launched their attack on Iran, which I think tells you all you need to know about how low this government has sunk.
I think it tells you all you need to know about how much we've sunk in the kind of international trust league table. And, you know, David Lammy's outburst over Israel and Gaza was a few weeks ago now, but it was so extraordinary. It's a kind of thing that doesn't just get glossed over. It was extremely undiplomatic, if I can put it that way. And I just don't think he's trusted. I don't think that this administration is trusted with that level of intelligence. What might they do with it? And I think what we're seeing now, which may well be the end of the Iranian regime. I mean, it's not really being reported quite like that yet, perhaps because nobody wants to be a hostage to fortune, saying this is it. But all the insider information that I have, which is limited but comes from a number of quite credible sources, is that this really is it. It's the beginning of the end, or the middle of the end for this regime. Thank you to Israel for that. And I'm wondering the extent to which all of those staunch critics of Israel are going to recognize the tremendous global service to peace that Israel will have delivered without actually the active help and participation of the US at this point, by taking out that Iranian regime, which is responsible for the vast majority of the instability in the Middle East.
Well, you wouldn't know if you were watching Sky News. They keep rerunning an interview they did last night with the Iranian ambassador to the UK, who accuses Israel of all kinds of war crimes and claims that this is yet another unprovoked attack on an innocent country. And they're carrying it literally without any challenge whatsoever. At one point, the person interviewing this guy sort of says, "Oh, ambassador tries to break in. He says, no, let me finish." That's the clip. There's nothing to refute what he's saying.
That's a case of, well, they would say that, wouldn't they?
Well, yeah.
Of course they would. But you know what? I wouldn't be that surprised if the same mob that take to the streets of London marching about the evils of Israel and free Palestine are going to start turning their sympathies towards what's going on to the Iranian...
Oh, they already have. They haven't done it on the streets specifically, but they've already done it sort of on social media. And all of those people who you see having a go at Israel for their attacks on Gaza and the occupation, as they call it, the same ones are sort of making out that Iran is the innocent party here.
Unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable, crashing levels of ignorance. But we know that from any interaction that people have had with those marching the Free Palestine Brigade. You start asking them what exactly is the cause they're marching for, and it doesn't survive the first couple of questions, really, does it?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. One of my favourite videos of the weekend was that Welsh guy trying to explain to Egyptian soldiers why he needed to get into Gaza for his peace mission to go and help the children who were dying and being killed by the Israeli monsters. And basically, they were all these kind of peaceniks were getting stuff thrown at them by Egyptians who don't want anything to do with Palestine or Palestinians, and certainly don't want them travelling over the border.
Oh, well. Well, at least Keir Starmer's nowhere near the action, is he? Where is our Keith today?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's put some very trendy-looking trainers on, presumably courtesy of Lord Ali's fashion assistant, and he's gone over to Canada to meet Mark Carney. But the whole G7 meeting now has been sort of undermined by what's going on in Israel and Iran.
Yeah, oh my God, look at the absolute state.
What's he wearing? I mean, come on, he's supposed to be the Prime Minister of a leading international country, and yet he's dressed as if he's going to a sort of, football match.
Oh dear, oh
Very
dear.
bad. But let's talk about...
Not as if there isn't enough to be worrying about here, is it? He really does not need a meeting with Mark Carney. That is one of those ones that could be done by Zoom, I'm feeling.
Definitely, particularly because of his incredible U-turn on this rape gang story. Let's have a look at what some of Labour government's top-notch names had to say about this.
Calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right. Then that affects politics.
No, the reason we're not doing another national inquiry is because there's already been a national inquiry. Do you want an inquiry or not?
No, Paul, I'm trying to answer your question, and the answer is no. We don't think another inquiry, after all the many inquiries that we've put victims through, is the way to tackle this.
There has been a huge amount of misinformation this week. Sadly, party political misinformation. It is just wrong.
We've already had a lengthy inquiry, which ended...
broad inquiry that encompassed some parts of the, some towns, 6 towns, I believe,
50 towns have been blighted by this issue. We don't know if it's still going on now. That inquiry was a much broader inquiry.
So you're right in saying it's broad, but we've got to look at what Professor Jay has said as well, which is that this doesn't need a further inquiry, and actually it's time for action.
Yeah. No need for another inquiry, apparently, Isabel, just a few short weeks ago.
Wow. I mean, that is absolute cringe, isn't it? I mean, every one of those that was sent out to say we don't need another inquiry now looks a complete and utter muppet, although, frankly, that's not much of a change from the normal position. But the politics of this are astonishing, aren't they? You know, they have resisted this for month after month after month and tried to smear and besmirch those that have campaigned staunchly to have an inquiry, a proper, full inquiry. I mean, I've always had some reservations about the idea of an inquiry that might last 10 years. I don't know what the time frame is for what's being announced, but it has to be a limited time frame. Otherwise, these things just go on and on and on and on. And it's quite clear that there are still these types of grooming gang behaviours are still happening. So we can't afford for an inquiry to go on forever until this government has long, hopefully, been booted out of office. It needs to be delivered in short order. I don't know what would be realistic. 3 years, maybe?
Something like that. I mean, I think a grooming inquiry says it's going to seek swift justice for victims on the front page of the Times. Baroness Casey, who seems to have done a pretty good job here, actually, because she's come up with this report in a fairly short time. She was commissioned, I think, to do it by Starmer and by the Labour government. So she's also expected to explicitly link the grooming gang problem to men of Pakistani origin and say that white British girls who were targeted were institutionally ignored for fear of racism. She's also very likely to link, I believe, from what I understand, illegal migration to some of these attacks. And so, you know, that's why I think Starmer's totally terrified of going against it, because he's now backed into a corner and he will have to do something and do it quick. But lots of other people are saying, but let's make sure that it's not just about the victims. Yes, of course, they're important. It's also about the cover-up.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Rachel Reeves was absolutely ridiculous in that interview with Trevor Phillips yesterday, where he kept going, "What matters, Trevor, is the victims." And again, you know, actually, yeah, of course that matters. You know, it's just, it's so similar to the way Labour tries to put the whole channel migrant things on the evil people smuggling gangs. Don't reduce it to a one-dimensional thing here. What matters is how on earth this was able to happen on an industrial scale under the noses of multiple authorities. So yes, of course the victims matter. That should go without saying. But to bang on about the victims is to shed responsibility, to try to move it away from the responsibility of all the public authorities that failed and failed and failed again.
Of course. And to use the victims as a kind of shield to hide away from all of that is actually even more despicable than not having an inquiry at all. You know, to go on and on about the victims are the only ones that matter here, when actually there's a lot of people that matter here, including the cover-up that was organised by some of the local councils, some of the Labour local councils in places like Oldham and Rochdale and Blackburn, and also the kind of the categorical avoidance of prosecution by the police. You know, those are the people I want to see in the dock.
I mean, this has been an absolute political disaster for Labour, and you know, it wasn't as if they, you know, they had, it was all negative against Labour. I mean, a lot of this happened during the Tory years. Of course it did, because there were 14 years of the Tories and coalition. So there was a way that Labour could have handled this, which didn't necessarily have to rebound politically solely on the Labour Party. But they've done the worst of all things, just like they've done with the winter fuel allowance, have not recognised the political reality of it early on. It's taken months and months and months for them to realise just how bad this was going to be for them politically. And now they've taken all the political hit in these intervening months, and there will be very little upside for them.
Yeah, absolutely right. And let's talk a bit about illegal migration before I let you go, because here's what Keir Starmer had to say about whether the French were doing enough when he was on his way to the G7 summit. He said, one of the things we've worked hard at is improving the relations with the French in relation to the work we both need to do to stop these boat crossings, which I'm determined we will absolutely bear down on. Huh?
Marvellous.
Sorry?
Well, if the question is, are the French doing enough? Let me answer that. No. Yeah. How about just saying no? And I think people are so sick of this political twaddle, you know, the word soup that comes out of our politicians' mouths. Do they not realise that they could get so much more support if they just said it as it is? You know, yes, sometimes it's undiplomatic. Yes, sometimes it's a little bit punchy. Well, that's what people want to hear because that's what they're feeling. How about just giving a straight answer to a straight question? And by the way, I'm still not over Darren Jones's unbelievable comment. Question time. You know, he's actually tried to dig his way out of that one, trying to claim that he was talking about a specific boat he'd seen full of women and children. I missed that one. Don't quite know how.
Yeah.
How about he says, look, I just got that completely crashingly wrong.
Yeah. Instead of which he's now saying he may have described it not quite as accurately as he should have. What you mean, you actually left out the salient point that you didn't see lots of men coming over on small boats because you only saw 3 boats which had loads of women and children, and which basically means I don't believe that story either.
I honestly despair of this lot. Keith, at the apex of it, is only part of the problem. There is not one of them right now that looks to me impressive and re-electable.
No, completely agree with you, totally. Isabel, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Isabel Oakeshott. We'll have a look at that Darren Jones clip a little bit later on in the show. And let's get a voice note from Sean.
Morning, Mike. Sean from Grimsby here. I think old Keir Starmer now should seriously consider resigning. I don't see how we can stand up and call now for a national inquiry into the rape gangs whilst him and his party have said that everybody who wants one is a racist or far-right tropes. I think the whole lot of them should resign, all of them, especially every single one of them who voted against the inquiry in the first place.
Yeah.
Great show, Mike.
Well, of course, they all did. Not only did they vote against it, they spoke out against the real need not to have one. They was absolutely convinced they didn't need one. They absolutely knew for a fact that we'd already had one and that there were going to be local ones and that anyone who was suggesting that we should have one was obviously some kind of far-right maniac jumping on a bandwagon, you know, and damaging politics. That's what it all was. It wasn't just that, you know, we don't think there's time to have one. We don't think it would be worthwhile to have one. We don't think... I mean, I've heard Maggie Oliver say in the past, although she's now welcomed the fact that there is one, she said in the past, I'm not sure that an inquiry is necessary. What's needed is some kind of action. And that was the line that Labour were pushing. You know, and you can make a case for it if you wish, but don't just do a U-turn completely and say, well, now we need to have a national inquiry. Because why? Oh, because Baroness Casey says we should. And we just better say it before she says it, otherwise it will look as if we're just copying what she's telling us to do. But of course, we know exactly why they're doing it. It's because they knew that her recommendation would be to do it. And they also thought, we'll get it out over the weekend when Iran and Israel blowing the bejesus out of each other, and hopefully it won't make any front pages. Unfortunately for them, the Daily Telegraph on a Sunday, the Sunday Telegraph, did the right thing and splashed it anyway, as did the Mail. Morning, Mike. Phil in sunny Coventry regarding the rape and grooming inquiry. Great news and years overdue, but as the government has proven time and time again, they're untrustworthy. I have no faith in Starmer at all. Well, that is the problem, isn't it? Coming up, 7:21, we're going to find out what the latest is in the Middle East.
I think the main thing is that we have been pushing for this now for many, many months, and we've had a Prime Minister whose response to that has been to say things of Kemi Badenoch and Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, along the lines of us jumping on some far-right bandwagon, or as Lucy Powell put it, to be responding to dog whistle politics, which is really pretty outrageous. Now, it's good that the Prime Minister has finally buckled on this one, but it's late in the day, which is deeply regrettable.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 24 minutes past 7. I've got this from Jim. So they want to take money out of our accounts without saying. HMRC hacked, Horizon scandal, corruption amongst officials. What could possibly go wrong, says Jim. Well, it's a very good point. This is on the story, of course, that the government is putting together something called the Fraud Bill, which is currently going through the House of Lords, in which it would become possible for middle-ranking HMRC officials and other civil servants to go fishing around in your bank account, and even worse than that, to remove funds from those bank accounts if they can say reasonably that they think you owe it to them. Huh? What, so without any sort of, court order, without any investigation, without any checks and balances, the government would be able to reach into your bank account and take money out of it and take it as a fine? I think that's absolutely the most outrageous thing I've ever heard. Let's talk now to Ruth Wasserman Land, former member of the Knesset and expert on Arab affairs, in the midst of what is now a pretty extensive war between Iran and Israel. Ruth, a very good morning to you.
Good morning to you too.
Nice to speak to you. I understand you're in Israel right now, so tell us first of all how difficult it's been there for the past few days. A lot of Iranian missiles are getting through the defences, partly because they're firing so many, apparently. What's it been like?
So first of all, as a mother, I can tell you that we didn't really sleep, not last night, not the night before, because the Iranian regime, rather than the Iranian people, don't wish for the Israeli civilians to sleep very much. In fact, they've been firing completely without any precision or targeting military facilities. They've been targeting civilians, very, very simply civilians. In other words, civilian population, very densely populated cities, centers of cities, and so on, blocks of flats and the likes. And we've been spending our nights and some of our days in the safe rooms. It's quite an ordeal, I must say. This is something that I think even Israelis, resilient Israelis, find quite challenging. And we've had not a few deaths and very many wounded thus far.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine it must be absolutely awful and obviously difficult for people to get out of Israel right now because of the fact that there's no commercial flights going. And I'm told as well that Benjamin Netanyahu has made it very clear that these Iranian strikes are not only aimed at harming Jewish civilians in Israel, but also Arab civilians who live in Israel.
Oh, absolutely. They've been, the city of Tamra in the north of Israel has been hit, not only targeted, the entire country is being targeted in civilian population. So it actually covers everyone, Christians, Muslims, Jews, foreign workers, and so on. But specifically, a missile fell in the city of Tamra, and an entire family was wiped out, a Muslim family. Also, there have been hits, and an entire Christian family in Haifa has been killed. There have been really terrible tragedies with this particular war, and it's quite astonishing, the resilience of the Israeli people, again, all of the Israeli people, because we all understand the necessity and the inevitability of this war, because there were four main aims of this particular campaign. And this is something that, is not clearly perhaps understood by the international arena. One is the nuclear program of the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Mullah regime. And that's not only against Israel, even though they declared us as the foremost enemy, but the West in general. So we're basically fighting the war of the West for them and taking the brunt. But there's also another very specific intention and objective, and that is the ballistic missile program, that even without a nuclear weapon or a nuclear warhead could have basically destroyed without air defenses the entire country. And again, not only Israel, but Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, other countries in the region, not to mention the West in general. So there are a few more objectives to this particular war, but people perhaps don't understand that the Iranian regime for the past 40-odd years has been preparing this against Israel and the West.
Yeah, and Israel has sorted out so many problems in the Middle East before, when others have kind of been reluctant to do so, certainly with Saddam Hussein in the past as well. Are you surprised in a way that, people are calling for de-escalation in the West? I mean, Keir Starmer, I was pretty insulted, and I think a lot of people were, by our own government when they put out that statement, along with the French and the Canadians, urging restraint in Gaza and all of that. And it now turns out that the Israeli government didn't even bother to tell the British government they were launching this attack, which is pretty disappointing, considering that we are supposed to be one of the great allies of Israel. And that's how low this government has got, in my view.
Well, there is a very large degree, a significant degree of secrecy to such a war. And yes, it was not shared with the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom and its government has been critical, in my humble opinion, and again, that does not go to say that the United Kingdom citizens are such, but the government has been very hypocritical about the entire issue. There's been a huge Islamist threat within the UK. Again, that doesn't mean every single Muslim, but it does mean that there is an attempt to almost overtake the kind of life that the West sees as fitting by a very significant, large, loud, and strong group of Islamists. The Islamic Republic of Iran is supporting that, funding that, training that, along with other factors like Qatar and so on. But certainly the Islamic Republic of Iran on the Shiite axis is certainly targeting the West without any doubt. It says that as well. There's no secrecy about it. And of course, funding many, many proxies like the Houthis, affecting economic trade routes that affect the West and the Western kind of life, not to mention Hezbollah and Hamas and Islamic Jihad and other proxies that are very, very dangerous, not only to Israel and the Jewish people, but to the West in general.
Yeah, absolutely, the Houthis as well. And so, Ruth, are you prepared to be in this for the long haul in terms of, running up and down into shelters and that kind of thing?
Well, let me put it in a very, very simple way. We don't have a choice. This is our country. This is our safe haven. Again, as a mother, for my children's safety, we have no choice but to eliminate the threat of the Islamic Republic of Iran that has clearly, openly declared that it wants the destruction of my country and all of my people. They've said that very clearly. And not only that, but programs have been found, in other words, proper plans for the complete annihilation of my country with nuclear power, with rocket barrage, and with weaponizing the proxies in the region. So it's not like we have much choice, nor do we enjoy particularly running to the safe rooms and having a heart attack every single time. But we do need to take care of ourselves. And no matter if we're on the left or the right of the political spectrum, this is in fact the safety of our country and our lives.
Appreciate it. Ruth, stay safe. Thank you very much indeed. Ruth Wasserman Land there talking to us from Israel, which is under attack constantly right now from Iranian missile fire. And of course, a lot of the Iranian missiles are not particularly accurate. So many of them are just being fired at random into civilian neighbourhoods and basically without any due attention to what could happen when they hit if they hit the wrong target. And they're firing so many of them that many of them are getting through the Iron Dome defence system. So that is absolutely a problem. Regarding the Father's Day cards Keith discovered in his suitcase, says Francis in Llanelli. Why is he unpacking his suitcase on a plane? Who on earth does that? What an absolute idiot. Excellent show again. I completely agree with Isabel. Listening to that Darren Jones on Question Time, are these idiots really running this country? I despair. Shall we have a look at what he had to say? This is Darren Jones talking on Newsnight, or Question Time rather, about the illegal migrant problem. No? No, we haven't got it. We'll come back with it. Why not? 7:33. You see, if that was the BBC, I'd be bullying them now. I'd be going, what the hell are you doing? You know, I'd be shaking people by the throat. That's what they do at BBC Breakfast. Not here, not at Morning Glory, no, because we're calm, we're considerable, considered, and very kind. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:35. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. Mark has got a voice note for us on defence.
Morning, Mike. It's Mark in Lancashire. Just on this net zero madness, a thought that struck me was that if a country's going to war with another nation, the first thing you want to do is knock out the capability to produce their own power. So basically, you bomb all the power stations. Next thing you want to do is knock out the capability to produce their own steel. So bomb all the steel-making works, totally destroy their industrial base so they can't make weapons, can't build tanks. Both those things our own government has done to us. I'm expecting it any day. They really are. I mean, they're stupid, aren't they? Why would they do this to us? No steel making, no power. I mean, idiots, total idiots.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. It's hard to conclude anything other than that, really. How about this from John, who says, great show, Mike. On the latest U-turn, will we now get an apology from Lucy Powell? Ray her dog whistle politics remarks on BBC Question Time. I think it was any answers, was it, or any questions, rather. John in West Sussex. You might remember this. This is when Lucy Powell responded to Tim Montgomery, a member of Reform now, former founder of Conservative Home. Have a listen.
Okay, Lucy. Yeah. The councils, there were so many people who were so afraid for good. Can I just finish the point, just for 1 minute?
Finish that point, Tim, and then I'll bring in Helen.
Look, there were so many people in local government, in the authorities, who, for good reasons, were worried about upsetting community tensions, that those girls went undefended. Now, there were good reasons for it, but no one has still been brought to justice for that. So you tell me, Lucy, that this isn't a culture in local government. It's just not true.
Dear.
Helen Morgan?
I think it's a total failure to understand how local government operates, actually.
Yes, I think we will just have to revisit that one because it's not quite what we thought it was. Never mind. Let's talk to Dr. Rakib Hassan, a political commentator right here, right now. Dr. Rakib, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. How are you?
Very well indeed. It's hard to imagine, isn't it, that Labour can, with such ease, just move from one belief to a completely separate one. You know, from completely opposite perspective. I mean, we've got a montage of half a dozen of them, and we'll play it in a bit. Basically saying why there should never be a national inquiry into the rape scandal, into the rape gangs, why it's already happened, why there's no need for it, why there's now time for action, you know, and yet now they're all singing from the same hymn sheet saying, well, now's the time to have a rape gang inquiry.
Well, it's quite remarkable, apart from a select number of Labour backbenchers and the blue Labour grandee, Lord Glassman, the Labour Party has generally opposed a national statutory inquiry. They've resisted calls for one, and they've provided a variety of excuses. They've said that the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse was sufficient in terms of investigating the issue, when it really wasn't the case, because a big thing with a national statutory inquiry is determining public sector accountability for gross institutional mismanagement. We haven't ever had a public investigation at the national level of that nature. So I think that we've also had this narrative that those who are calling for a national statutory inquiry into grooming gangs were jumping on some kind of far-right bandwagon, which I thought was hugely insulting.
Well, those were the words he used. And the J inquiry that went before, which was commissioned by the Tory government, didn't just look into Pakistani heritage grooming gangs, or rape gangs, as we prefer to call them here at Talk. It looked at the problem of child exploitation. It wasn't anything to do with the incredible number of rape gangs in parts of the north of England in particular, specifically in Labour-controlled councils. That's what needs to be looked at, because despite what Rachel Reeves may say, it's not about the victims just. Of course the victims are important, but it's about the cover-up, and it's about the people responsible for keeping it quiet and not prosecuting anyone.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that with the National Statutory Inquiry, I authored a piece for CAPEX back in January, writing what a National Statutory Inquiry could look like, how it could be structured. Now, of course, we should look into the social, cultural and economic drivers of grooming gang activity. Now, that's formerly known as group localised child sexual exploitation. And there's a number of studies which show that men of Pakistani Muslim heritage are disproportionately represented in that kind of activity. So we need to know what the cultural and social drivers there, which are driving these kinds of activity. But I think crucially, we've had gross institutional mismanagement, especially in parts of the country such as Greater Manchester, in Rotherham and Telford. But I think what we need is very clear that whether it's local councils, police forces, social services, safeguarding teams, even the school system, the key here is determining public sector accountability, identifying individuals who ultimately failed in their duty of care to the most vulnerable in society.
Well, it comes back to the old question of who knew what when, doesn't it? You know, because that's really all you need to do. You go into these organisations and you say, right, let's get all the people out here who were made aware of all of these pieces of information and the fact that this was going on, and then what did you do with it? What did you know about it? And when did you cover it up? It's as simple as that, really, isn't it? It doesn't need to be an inquiry that goes on for years.
No, it doesn't. I think that if you have a very clear structure to the inquiry, it doesn't need to be a long-winded one. I think we also need to investigate, unfortunately, to what extent was there collusion between public sector officials and grooming gang abusers. And I think the reason why we need a national inquiry is, even though much of this grooming gang activity was localised, there were networks which were beyond one local area. So it's very important to join the dots and see how deep these networks were and how wide they were. So I think that all of this is very important for a national statutory inquiry. But I think the key here is determining public sector accountability, which might, from that, there should be a realistic prospect of criminal prosecutions flowing for that, or at the very least, loss of position and pension entitlement.
Yeah, I think so. Let's have a look at something that we did a little bit earlier, and this was, of course, something from, well, Mark actually drew attention to it. He said, from North East Somerset, a big up to the team for putting the inquiry montage together. It was brilliantly done. Have a great week. Have a look at this.
Calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right, then that affects politics.
No, the reason we're not doing another national inquiry is because there's already been a national inquiry. Do you want an inquiry or not?
No, Paul, I'm trying to answer your question, and the answer is no. We don't think another inquiry, after all the many inquiries that we've put victims through, is the way to tackle this.
There has been a huge amount of misinformation this week. Sadly, party political misinformation. It is just wrong.
We've already had a lengthy inquiry, which ended...
broad inquiry that encompassed some parts of the, you know, some towns, 6 towns, I believe. 50 towns have been blighted by this issue. We don't know if it's still going on now. That inquiry was a much broader inquiry.
So you're right in saying it's broad, but we've got to look at what Professor Jay has said as well, which is that this doesn't need a further inquiry, and actually it's time for action.
That's that plank Mike Tapp there at the end, talking about what he thinks there shouldn't be an inquiry about. You know, it's incredible, isn't it, how they all sing from the same hymn sheet, and of course now Rachel Reeves is saying, oh, well, you know, it's a good idea to have an inquiry now because it's all about the victims.
Well, it's an embarrassing U-turn. We also had Labour politicians saying we shouldn't put the victims through much more pain and suffering. That's why we shouldn't hold a national statutory inquiry. It's quite a remarkable form of justification, really. And I think that what you really see here is that this is quite an embarrassing U-turn. And Labour, if they had just announced a national statutory inquiry at the beginning of the year, they would have taken the moral high ground, actually, because we had 14 years of Tory-led rule. There's no national statutory inquiry organised during those 14 years. But I think that the reality is, I think that within the Labour Party, there's a squeamishness, because, as you say, much of this grooming gang activity took place in historically Labour-controlled local authorities. If you take, for example, Rotherham Metropolitan Borough Council, that's been under Labour control since it was created in 1974, Mike.
Yeah. I know, it's incredible, isn't it? And also, knowing what we do know from listening to some of those victims who have spoken quite openly in recent times about what happened to them, you know, we know that it wasn't just, you know, sort of isolated events. A lot of these young women were trafficked from one town to another, taken from one gang into another gang. You know, there was no question that it was a complete network of scumbags who were carrying out these awful acts against children, effectively, but they were doing it in concert with one another. One girl talked about being taken to Rotherham, to Doncaster, to Rochdale, to Edinburgh, you know, to Telford, up and down the country, and just handed around.
No, and some of the accounts, if I'm being absolutely honest, Mike, and I don't say this lightly, we're talking about forms of sexual violence and abuse, which wouldn't be out of place in a war zone.
Yeah, totally.
And this took place in modern England.
I know, absolutely incredible. And also, more importantly, I think the Casey report is likely to draw a comparison between the large numbers of illegal young men coming to this country on small boats and these attacks.
Well, I think that for some time I've been talking about illegal migration being a national security emergency. I've been using that term for years, and I think I'll be very keen to see this connection, this reported connection between illegal migration and grooming gang activity, which has been identified from Baroness Casey. I'll be looking forward to reading that, actually.
Yeah, I think so. I think we'll be finding quite a lot of material in that to talk about for some time to come. Rakib, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
Rakib, political commentator there. Let's get a voice note from James.
Morning, Mike. James from Blackburn. Yeah, you and Isabel are right, but the problem with Keir Starmer is he will always back himself into a corner because he has absolutely no morals whatsoever. I don't even know what he believes in. Like, at least with people like Jeremy Corbyn, you're going to vote them, but yeah, you know what they believe in. You might not like it, but you know what you're going to get. But with this guy, he's dangerous because we know what he believes in, but then he's that desperate for power. He will flip and flop and go any which way to try and cling to it. And he's got absolutely no shame whatsoever. So, yeah, he's backed himself into a corner with a grooming gang and things now. But he genuinely thinks that we're all plebs and that we're all thick. So he thinks, oh, it doesn't matter if there's videos out of me going, bandwagon, far right, fags, bandwagon. He doesn't care because he just thinks, oh, they're thick. They won't even remember. He's an absolute horror.
Well, the trouble is we do remember, and the trouble is when you say things on broadcast media, they tend to be recorded, and you can just replay them. Here's Lucy Powell.
I don't know whether you saw the documentary on Channel 4 about rape gangs over
No,
this.
we want to blow that little trumpet now, do we? Yeah, okay.
There was a real issue where...
Let's get that dog whistle out, shall we?
Yeah, the dog whistle, the right-wing thuggery, you know, the bigoted nastiness, you know, all of that, jumping on the right-wing bandwagon. Yeah, well, apparently that's what every Labour politician is now doing. So all of those people, like Lucy Powell, like Rachel Reeves, like Yvette Cooper, like Mike Tapp, all of these people who said there was no need for a national inquiry, are all now today saying, well, what we need is a national inquiry. You know, in any other business, these people would disqualify themselves from any job. If you had a meeting with a guy and said, what's your recommendation about what we should do, you know, going forward, if you like to use the correct parlance, what do you think we should do about this particular problem? Well, I'll tell you what we should definitely not do. We shouldn't do that, OK? Definitely not that. And then the following week, the same guy comes back in and he says, listen, I think, you know that thing you asked me about the other day, when I said we shouldn't do that, we definitely should do it now. You'd just tell the guy to get out of the room, wouldn't you? Get lost. What are you doing? You know, Captain Flip-Flop. You know, I don't think so. 7:48.
Refusing to watch that film, and for being...
We owned the freehold of the Chagos Islands, and we still do until this treaty is signed. And Mr. Tapp may have been a brilliant, brave soldier, but he clearly has no idea about property law. Now they've sort of invented this, his own tap trap, so to speak, because he then said, once we've got a lease on these islands, no one can take them off us because we're part of NATO, and NATO would stop them. Well, hang on, we're part of NATO now. Yeah. We own the freehold. Yeah. If anybody tried to take them from us, we wouldn't let them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through. Nan in Wales says this rape inquiry is the biggest disgusting blight on this country, especially the Labour Party. Surely we cannot let them direct this. And Peter says, morning Mike, based on Starmer's policy of taking retrospective credit for everything, how long before it will be before he claims the Battle of Britain, D-Day and the '66 World Cup victory were all his doing? I know, incredible, isn't it? And John in Rugby, morning Mike, great news about the inquiry into the rape gangs, but knowing Starmer has a talent for lying, dishonesty, betrayal and treachery. That is the difficulty, you see. People just don't believe a word that he says. You know, you can congratulate him if you wish for actually finally making the decision to take the advice from people like us, from you people like you, the ones who have been voting in their absolute droves for reform, to say to Starmer, you need to wake up and smell the coffee, matey, and you better get a national inquiry done, regardless of what you think you thought about it before. You can maybe give him credit for finally listening. And maybe we can take some credit for putting enough pressure on him. But the bottom line is, if it's not done right and it's not done properly, people will never forgive him. And that is the bottom line. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Let's talk now to Roxanne Hoge, who's the chair of the Republican Party in Los Angeles, California, because there's some American stuff we need to discuss. Roxanne, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, good evening.
Good evening to you, I should say. Sorry, my apologies. Good to talk to you. How are things out there at the moment? How are the riots going? Because the last time I spoke to one of our colleagues in LA, it was all still going off. Is it calmed down a bit?
Well, you know, after midnight or when it gets really late, people go back. They only pay them for their shifts about 8 hours. So I think they'll be taking a rest before they get back on the clock.
Oh yeah, what you mean? You're talking about the sort of the rebel rousers, the people who are sort of paid for exacerbators of the situation.
Yes, definitely. The Dramacrats, as we like to call them, have an entire wing that's dedicated to what they call direct action, and that involves making life miserable for anybody who has to traverse city streets.
Yeah, no, naturally, of course. Let's talk about Donald Trump, because there was a big military parade for his birthday at the weekend. Quite a few demonstrations from, as you say, the Dramacrats talking about how they don't want a king in the White House. What did you make of the whole military thing?
Well, here's an interesting fun fact. It was actually the birthday of the United States Army.
Yeah.
So it, as someone said, what Donald Trump can do, going back in time to make sure that he was born on the same day as the U.S. Army is really dastardly. Just goes to show what a horrible tyrant he really is. So it was a coincidence that it was his birthday as well. I know my mom was completely just overcome by what, it swells their patriotic pride to see the people who sacrifice. And in this country, it's a very small percentage of families that do serve in the military. It's an all volunteer military. And to know what American soldiers have done throughout history and what they continue to do is really something.
Absolutely. Let's have a little look at what Trump had to say, because I think this is him speaking at that military parade.
Time and again, America's enemies have learned that if you threaten the American people, our soldiers are coming for you. Your defeat will be certain, your demise will be final, and your downfall will be total and complete. Because our soldiers never give up, never surrender, and never, ever quit. They fight, 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 and they win, win, win.
I mean, it was funny, The Independent here, which is probably considered to be one of the more lefty newspapers here, sort of was trying to be, as usual, trying to be sort of a bit mealy-mouthed and critical in a rather snide way. They said it wasn't so much, Kim Jong-un in North Korea, it was more, July the 4th in your small-town America. But actually, people in America rather like July 4th in small-town America, don't they?
Yes, it is a wonderful holiday if you like America, but unfortunately some of our friends on the left don't actually like America.
No.
And that's the crux of the problem.
Yes. And I mean, one of the strangest stories I guess we've seen, and a tragic story over the weekend, was the case of Vance Bolter, this guy who's now still on the run, a gunman who gunned down Melissa Hortman, a Democratic State University, a Democratic State representative of Minnesota, and her husband Mark at 3 a.m. on Saturday. Also attacked some other people as well. Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette, they survived. Nobody's quite sure what his motivation is, but it's emerged that basically he was given a job by Kamala Harris's running mate, who is, of course, was the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz.
I think I have a 24-hour rule on these things because everything is so fast-moving. In fact, I think he may actually now be in custody.
Oh, okay.
But the truth is that no one knows for now, and with the speed at which social media jumps to sort of erase the profiles of anyone suspected of any sort of activity like this, really leaves the rest of the world going, wait, what? Why can't we see who this person was and what they were saying beforehand? Yes, he may have had a commissioned position, but that may not have been a big deal. I think it's one of those things that'll take a minute to sort out. My other rule that works is if you don't hear too much about it, you realize that the left couldn't make hay with it.
Yeah.
So we'll see in the next day or two if we continue to hear about it.
Yeah, indeed. And what's the view there and the mood at the moment about what's going on with Iran? I mean, there's a story here in in the papers this morning saying that Donald Trump vetoed the Israeli wish to do away with the Iranian supreme deity, you know, the guy that runs the country, the supreme commander. And Donald Trump has warned Iran that America will get involved if they have to.
My friends who are escapees from Persia, and we have a lot of them here in Los Angeles. Several of us banded together in the COVID battles. It was Persian parents really who were at the forefront of saying, "Excuse me, why are you closing schools, public schools in Los Angeles?" And so they and their parents and their families fled a once vibrant country. And while it's horrible always to see any devastation, there's nothing more devastating, as my friend Human Hamadi says, than to have Revolutionary Guard beat women, flog them, pursue them for the crime of showing their hair or of singing a song. And so the mullahs deserve their comeuppance whenever and however it happens.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would disagree with you on that one. Roxanne, thanks for talking to us. Thank you very much indeed. Roxanne Hoge there, reporting into us from Los Angeles, where the riots seem to have died down a little bit, funnily enough. And as she said, the Dramocrats, as they're known, seem to be wanting trouble wherever they go. 39,559 is the number on the migrant tracker right now, sitting there in front of you. We're keeping track of it. 1,500 people came over in the last few days because, of course, the weather is relatively calm. It's relatively warm. It's relatively safe to make those crossings, and so they're continuing to make them. Let's get a voice note from Steve.
Good morning, Mike. Stephen Harts. It's becoming clear to me at this point that Keith Starlin's chief advisor must be my old Sergeant Major from the Brigade of Guards, because all he does is about time. Have a great day, mate.
Steve, very well said. Here's one from Alison in St Albans saying, Mike, don't you hope that Kemi Badenoch will ask Keir Starmer at PMQs whether Louise Casey is far right? Great show. And Stuart says, the very fact that Starmer is, to say the least, very unpopular with the British public and it doesn't seem to bother him says everything about the man. Well, we had a fascinating insight into the man when Deanna Davidson was here, the former Tory MP, last Friday. She was here with us looking at the morning papers and telling us that whenever she held the door open for Keir Starmer in the House of Commons, he never, ever acknowledged it. He never looked at her. He never said thank you. He never even sort of admitted that her existence was there. And so it went for the people in his entourage as well. And she said it happened quite a few times. Jeremy Corbyn, she said, was much friendlier. So what does that tell you about the man who now leads this country? It's quite a weird story. This is, of course, Morning Glory. More coming up in the next hour.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe. Fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips, in Leeds it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60 pence. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Keeping it real.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 3 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Peter Cardwell in for Julie Hartley-Brewer this morning at 10. We've got plenty to talk about on the show. We've still got 2 more hours to go. Will Kingston's here, and also Harry Cole, the editor-at-large of The Sun, will join us. He's got a column in there this morning all the way through talking about lawyer, leader Keir Starmer lacks judgment. Talks about his U-turn, possibly the biggest U-turn so far of his career, and he's made plenty of them. I mean, it wasn't that long ago since he made the U-turn on the winter fuel allowance, remember? And suddenly after saying we have to make tough choices, we have to make tough decisions, you know, this government was left with a terrible £20 billion black hole, or was it 22 billion? And so now we've had to make the tough choices of basically removing pensioners' fuel allowance so that they can wither and get very, very cold in the winter time. But then suddenly we can give it back to them. Why? Oh, because we've fixed the economy. But except the economy isn't fixed, so that was a U-turn, a massive one. He's now committed an incredible U-turn over the weekend and decided that he wants a national inquiry into the rape gangs that have blighted so many towns in the north of England and some towns outside of the north of England as well. Mostly Labour councils, in fact practically all Labour councils. Cover-ups galore, police not doing their jobs, young children being harmed beyond belief, some even suffering terrible injuries and even death as a result of being handed around by these Pakistani rape gangs. Absolutely incredible stuff. Let's have a listen, though, to what he said to those people just in January who wanted to have a national inquiry.
Calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right, then that affects politics because a robust debate can only be based on the true facts.
Yeah, and the true facts apparently now are that there has to be a national inquiry into the terrible things that happened in those towns where the Labour government, the Labour council were in charge, where the police turned a blind eye, where councillors quite often turned a blind eye, often because they were protecting members of their own families. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. Coming up as well, we'll have a look at what the front page of The Sun is talking about. Bullying probe at the BBC breakfast show. This is apparently because of the fact that Naga Munchetti and Charlie Stay have fallen out to such an extent that they barely speak to each other. And when they do speak to each other, it's usually through another bloke called Richard Frediani, who doesn't speak to either of them. So nobody's talking to each other inside the BBC. It's not like that here at Morning Glory. Here at Morning Glory, it's all sweetness and light. We all talk to each other, and if we have an issue, we talk about it like gentlemen and ladies, and we get along with each other, and we don't have fights, and we don't stab each other in the back. I can't speak for all the other shows on the station, obviously. That would be wrong. It's 5 minutes past 8. Morning Glory, let's get it on. One of the pictures we've been showing you this morning is Keir Starmer actually on a plane on his way to Canada, where he is now currently for the G7, opening up some Father's Day cards, rather, from his children. Martin says this: if the cards were hidden in his case, has he lied about packing his own case? And there's another picture there that we've also been talking about. When he first met Mark Carney, I think that was his on-air flight suit. He's wearing a pair of trainers, probably quite expensive-looking trainers, and some jeans and a sort of a dark shirt. You know, and it's not necessarily a bad thing to have those kinds of clothes, but should you really be wearing them when you meet up with another world leader? Did Lord Ali buy those cards, says Glenn from Leeds? Well, I can't say, but he's issued yet another video this morning. This came out just about half an hour ago, and this is Keir Starmer wandering around in the woods. Go figure. Now, this one doesn't have any music, but he's walking in a field there, surrounded by presumably his bodyguards. He's now standing, staring out at a vista. He's got his phone out. He's taking pictures one way, then he's taking pictures another way. I mean, he's got an official photographer there as well, so I don't know whether he's taken 2 pictures and put the phone back in his pocket, and now he's walking some. Well, I don't know, why has he bothered putting these out? I don't really understand. Some people are saying it looks a bit like The Sound of Music. You know, the hills are alive with the sound of absolute and utter U-turning. He says, a quick walk in the mountains. This is what he actually wrote on the tweet. Quick walk in the mountains before the G7 gets going. Not a bad spot. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't know, I don't see the point of it. I don't understand why he's doing it. Let's talk to Will Kingston, political commentator and host of the Fire at Will podcast. I mean, given Will the necessity for him to put like a video out about every couple of hours, this one doesn't appear to, maybe the guy who puts the music on them isn't travelling with him to Canada. I don't know. But it's very weird, isn't it?
Mike, what you've got to remember is that there's a 25-year-old social media manager who's doing this, and they're trying to humanise a 65-year-old robot.
Yeah.
And there's a very big disconnect there.
But how can anybody in their right mind, though, I mean, regardless of age, Will, look at that and go, yeah, happy with that, definitely, let's put that out? Why?
Because if you are in a social media management role, your job is to try and make your boss connect with the electorate, but they don't understand that people aren't buying it. You've got to have some clay to try and mould, and there just isn't any with Keir Starmer. There is no essence, there's no soul, there's no core to him, and people get that. Like, they really should just try and play the... and this would be difficult, but the whole, you know, I'm boring, I'm a bit of a kind of soulless robot, but I'm competent, I get the job done. But the sad reality is he's not getting the job.
I was going to say the problem with that particular piece of advice is he's not particularly competent, and he's really not getting the job done. And they do keep saying it. They keep saying these things like, the plan is working. This is why we're doing this. And now, I mean, the barefaced lie of this grooming gangs thing is quite staggering, isn't it? Because even for him to make a U-turn as dramatic as this, because it's not just about the fact that he didn't want to do it before. It's about the fact that he was so vociferous about why he didn't want to do it before, and it was because he didn't want to jump on a right-wing bandwagon. We've got plenty of evidence, and in fact, I'll play it to you now if you haven't seen it, an incredible montage of Labour sort of bigwigs in the government saying why it's not necessary to have an inquiry. Check it out.
Calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right, then that affects politics.
No, the reason we're not doing another national inquiry is because there's already been a national inquiry.
Do you want an inquiry or not?
No, Paul, I'm trying to answer your question, and the answer is no. We don't think another inquiry, after all the many inquiries that we've put victims through, is the way to tackle this.
There has been a huge amount of misinformation this week. Sadly, party political misinformation. It is just wrong.
We've already had a lengthy inquiry, which ended...
Broad inquiry that encompassed some parts of the, some towns, 6 towns, I believe. 50 towns have been blighted by this issue. We don't know if it's still going on now. That inquiry was a much broader inquiry.
So you're right in saying it's broad, but we've got to look at what Professor Jay has said as well, which is that this doesn't need a further inquiry, and actually it's time for action.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was pretty much a good section of the cabinet there, and that idiot at the end, Mike Tapp, who's not in the cabinet as far as I know, talking about why it's not required. They're all now going to have to eat humble pie and remember that actually they now have to say something completely different. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, they're not going to eat humble pie, Mike, because we're entering a very painful new stage of the grooming gang saga, and that will be the gaslighting stage, where these MPs will pretend like all along that they were hardline on this, and they've always been supportive of measures to try and tackle the grooming gangs, and they just haven't been. I've been reflecting this morning, what is it about the spin of this Labor government that I find particularly infuriating? Because after all governments spin, and it is because they seem to insult your intelligence in a way which I don't even think Blair did. I don't even think, any of the Conservative governments over the last 14 years have done. Spin only takes you so far. It needs to be based on some kernel of truth, or it needs to actually be based on something which the government believes in, and they're trying to spin the best possible narrative to get it over the line. Whereas this government just basically takes things that they don't believe in, that we know they don't believe in, but they've been forced into a position to take, and therefore they just lie to you in order to do it. You mentioned earlier in your monologue, we've now fixed the foundations of the economy, so we're moving on to the next stage. People aren't stupid.
No.
They know that every single economic indicator has got worse since they've got in.
Right.
And I think it's this fundamental assault on the intelligence of British people that we find so frustrating. Because again, I don't think I've seen an equivalent in my lifetime in politics.
No, I think that is the problem, because all you have to do is look at any one of those videos that gets put out by, as you say, the 25-year-old social media boss or whoever it is, and they are all literally attacks on Keir Starmer, and I mean, we got to a point where Sadiq Khan now doesn't actually allow anybody to comment on the videos that he puts out because it got so bad. I mean, Starmer's going to have to do the same thing pretty soon, because literally one after another, every single comment is a negative one, either disbelieving what he's saying or accusing him of something, or just giving him abuse. There's never been in my world, in my view, a more unpopular Prime Minister.
Yeah, it's a combination of a lack of conviction and then a lack of talent or ability, and you put those two things together, and it's a terrible combination. And a lack of any sort of rhetorical flair or polish. Like, again, we know by the end that Boris Johnson, was pretty incompetent, but at least he had a bit of a rhetorical flair about him.
Yeah, but when you look at what Boris Johnson did, I mean, he was a far more competent Prime Minister and a far more competent politician than Keir Starmer's ever been. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, it's all relative, isn't it? So yeah, it is incredibly frustrating, and it's just I do wonder now how much longer Keir Starmer has, because I think everyone in the Labor Party now is fully aware that he's not just unpopular in a way that a lot of leaders have been unpopular in their first year in office. He is toxic with the electorate. And I think it would actually be a very wise Labor Party that would take him in as the leader to the next election. Sorry, a very brave Labor Party.
Very. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think he's going to be around. But the lying thing seems to have spread now to everybody. It's not just Rachel Reeves. It's not just Keir Starmer. It's not just David Lammy. It's now even Darren Jones, who up until relatively recently was seen as a reasonably competent minister. He's kind of deputy in the Treasury to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves. But have a look at what he said when he was on Question Time. He got a lot of flack for this.
And when you see that the majority of the people in these boats are children, babies and women who have been...
No, they're not, came the cry, and no, they're not, said the audience. And in fact, he then had to clarify it the following day, and he's been apologising ever since for what he says was a badly explained scenario. But you can see from that, he claims that when he went down to Dover, he was shown 2 boats that had arrived, or possibly 3 boats that had arrived, that were full of women and children. That's not what he said. He said that everybody knows that the vast majority of the people who come to these shores on the small boats are women and children, which is absolutely categorically not true. More than 75% of them are single lone men of fighting age. It's a fact, and he lied about it.
Yeah, he did. But I think they're also living in a pre-social media. Ironically, for a government that's trying to change the narrative via social media, they also forget that social media works both ways. And whereas in the past, we didn't see the footage of dinghies coming from France onto the beaches of the United Kingdom with our own eyes. We just read about it, sporadically in newspapers. Now you can see the footage. People can see it with their own eyes. So this sort of gaslighting no longer works. But the other thing I'd add very quickly on this, Mike, is that this is a common thread that runs through the lies of this government, and that it is lies to justify a failed ideology of multiculturalism, effectively, in that this is just something that he wants to be true. He wants to believe that these people are all poor, innocent women and children coming from war-torn countries, and it's our obligation to help them, when the facts don't add up to that. Same thing with grooming gangs. They want to believe that this isn't a problem around culture. It's just a problem probably around men, is probably how they would like to frame it. But it just doesn't add up to the reality. And so they keep pushing lies to try and prop up a failed ideology, which has been the backbone of left-wing politics for 40 years, and people are no longer buying it anymore.
Yeah, which is why we still get lefties going, oh yeah, but the vast majority of, grooming gangs are actually run by British white people. Well, that may well be true, but the whole point of the numbers game is that the Pakistani community in this country is a tiny minority of the people here, and they account for a far higher majority of those kind of gang activities. And that's why it's a story they've been trying to cover up, because they don't want to have to admit that. For whatever reason, I don't know. But let's talk about another thing that's problematic, I think, for this government now, and it's been their approach to the Middle East. It's been their approach to Israel over the course of the last several months. And it's got so bad now that relations between Israel and the UK mean that Israel did not share information with the UK before they attacked Iran last Thursday night.
Yeah, well, this is another thing you've got to remember about this government, in that they are increasingly beholden to a growing Islamic voter base in this country. It's a voter base which is going to abandon them in the next election in favour of Islamic candidates. And again, the rise of Islamic sectarian politics is a whole other story that we can talk about at another time, Mike. But everything that this government does is through that prism. It is why they're not soft on the boats. It's why they're soft on the boats. It's why they are not a friend of Israel. at the moment, and the Israelis know that. They're well aware of the internal political dynamics of the United Kingdom, and it's why that you continue to hear this sort of mealy-mouthed pacifism from people like Lammy and Starmer, and it is purely because, well, sorry, I think it's two reasons. It's number one, because genuinely, I think ideologically they are not a friend of Israel. But number two, it is because they know that if they do take a more supportive position of Israel, they are going to lose votes in those sorts of now Islamic majority electorates, which are a growing proportion of the voter base of this country.
Yeah, absolutely right. Will, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Will Kingston, our political commentator, host of the Fire at Will podcast. Let's get a voice note from Darren.
Good morning, Mike. It's Darren here from Carmarthenshire. Hope you're well. Just wanted to update you on my whereabouts this week, Mike. Actually on the Chagos Islands at the moment with Sir Keir Starmer. So we flew out together last night, Mike. We brought a tin of corned beef with us just for something to eat. But having had a couple of brief chats with Sir Keir Starmer, Mike, I realised that the corned beef was going to provide more interesting conversation. So I started talking to the tin of corned beef, Mike, and I started eating Sir Keir Starmer. So there's not too much left of him now, actually. So there won't be much left to bring back. You'll be pleased to hear. Have a good day, Mike.
Darren, thanks very much indeed. I'm sorry to inform you that you seem to have got yourself an impersonator with you, because, of course, everybody knows he's not in Chagos. We've already sold that off, thanks very much indeed. He's now in Canada. Maybe he's going to sell that off. I don't know what he's doing there, but he's meant to be taking part in the G7. At the moment, he's put out a tweet of him walking around in the mountains, which he says is a very nice spot. And then there he is taking some pictures with his phone, and then walking around a bit more. I don't know who he's with. He's with a load of blokes who look as if they work for him. He doesn't seem to be talking to any of them. I don't know. I don't know why he's doing it. You know, he's the British Prime Minister. Surely there should be a bit more kind of, you know, style and, I don't know, just a little bit more gravitas, really. You know, not trainers and jeans and a dark jacket and a dark shirt. Very few people can carry that off. And also, he's a bit old for that kind of caper, isn't he? Now, it's 19 minutes past 8.
The community had been complaining to their politicians, had been complaining to the police, had been complaining to social services, and just felt they were being totally ignored. No one supports the thuggery of setting fire to buildings, even a community centre. But you need to understand what was boiling up, whether it's that Darren Jones idiot on Question Time, whether it's our Islington-based human rights lawyer, knighted Prime Minister. I don't think these people even understand the scale of the problem.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:22. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Sean from Grimsby says, if Kemi has a brain, her first question at PMQ should be, will the Prime Minister apologise for saying that everyone who wants a national inquiry is far right? If not, is the Prime Minister a member of the far right? Watch him squirm. And then Tim in Southampton says, Starmer announcing a public inquiry is one thing, but this will be curtailed by the terms of reference, just like the COVID inquiry. It will cost millions, take years, ask the wrong questions and conclude nothing. The people's only form of redress is to vote these duplicitous bozos out at the earliest opportunity. Well, let's talk to Harry Cole, editor-at-large for The Sun. He's got a big piece today in the paper, in his column every single Monday. The lawyer leader lacks judgment yet again. Harry, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
So, another U-turn, this time even a bigger U-turn than the Windsor Fuel Allowance U-turn. I mean, we've been playing it this morning, you know, Cabinet Minister after Cabinet Minister telling us why back in January we didn't want a national inquiry. We already had one, don't need one. There's local ones that are going to be going on. This is all just a far-right sort of, you know, dog whistle, disgraceful stuff. I mean, how much more barefaced can these people be?
Well, yeah, if you look back to 6 months ago, back in January, there was even a vote in the House of Commons that the Labour whipped their MPs against.
Yeah.
Even MPs that are now welcoming the inquiry actually were forced by Labour whips through the division lobbies to vote it down. Mysteriously, Starmer managed to have a diary clash that day, so he didn't make that vote alongside some senior members of his cabinet. It's a classic Starmer, this one, in the fact that lots of people around him, lots of people in government thought there was an inevitability that there was probably going to have to be an inquiry at this point. But instead of getting on the front foot, leaning in, frankly saying, look, I banged up some of these people when I was director of prosecutions. I know about all this, and I think we should have an inquiry. He obfuscated and he set up a review. He tried to kick it into the long grass, hope it'd all go away. He clearly didn't want to give in to Elon Musk and reform and the Tories who were pushing for this inquiry. So he sort of dug his heels in, and it's kind of classic that the review has now come back 6 months later and said, you know what, actually we do need an inquiry. And just like he wasn't able to say, the obvious that a woman can't have a penis. Women need their own safe spaces protected, like bathrooms. Until a judge had said that in the Supreme Court, Starmer sort of was all over the place on it. And then once a judge said it, he said it. Now he's hiding behind this review that says, yes, we should have we should have an investigation. And lo and behold, here he is saying, oh, now I think we should. So why can't he ever just actually lead and actually see the wood from the trees in front of him and get on the front foot? It's a remarkable trait that he seems to have, that he always ends up looking, whether or not he is, he always makes it look like he's being dragged kicking and screaming. Things he doesn't want to do.
Because it looks as though he behaves not as if he's in politics, but as if he's in the law and he's in the legal business, that he's going to wait until he goes into the meeting with the senior partners to say, oh, look, I found this piece of legislation that we can use to win the case. It's almost like that's how he's operating, because I presume that he set Dame Louise Casey off on the report so that she would come back and say there's no need for a national inquiry. So he's kind of got that wrong as well, because he should have seen that that's what she was going to say.
Yeah, and look, Louise Casey's quite a prominent figure. She's the sort of woman that was brought in to make sticky problems for ministers go away. She does the hard thinking when ministers find it too tough, and she's done lots of these reports and audits and things like that. She's doing one on social care at the same time, and various other bits and bobs. The idea that in this climate, in this political mood, in this outrage around the country, people are furious about this. The idea that she was going to come back and be, you know what, I'll be Starmer's whipping boy on this. I'll be the woman that says we don't need an inquiry. And when it was so blindingly obvious that we did need an inquiry, just from the facts that were publicly available at the time. So this idea that she's suddenly uncovered some new mystery about the fact that hundreds of Pakistani origin men raped, drugged, abused thousands of British girls. That's not new information. That is enough. There was enough information in the public domain in January to say, why don't we bring this all together for once? Why don't we have this moment of national reckoning about such a big scandal? And the idea that Louise Casey was going to be a human shield for Keir Starmer not to have an inquiry is daft. I suspect she was always going to have to come back and say there would be. So if he thought that was going to make it go away, then he's been hoisted by his own petard. And you're right. There's lots of people that have worked with him in opposition and in government who say he has this sort of I know best trait. which even people around him, his advisors, his closest aides, often can't, they want him to do the right thing. They want him to succeed, but he locks himself away at times, makes decisions on him that he believes are the correct ones, and then will not take advice on stuff. So, which is not a great trait for a PM, because the best PMs are the ones that actually do listen to the people around the table and then make decisions. So, as you said at the top, we get to these situations where suddenly it turns out he doesn't know best, and then the slow, painful U-turn has to be executed, and we're going to add this to a long, growing list of them.
We are. And Rachel Reeves was at pains yesterday to try and point out that it's the victims that really matter. Have a look at what she said to Trevor Phillips.
Quoting here, and misinformation, and those who were more or less accused of racism for raising this issue?
The most important thing is getting justice.
Well, no, this is what I've asked you is the most important thing.
Well, no, Trevor.
For many people who were criticised in that way.
Trevor, what is the most important thing?
Of course,
it is
the position of the victims. I understand
that. It is the victims, and it's not people's hurt feelings about how they've been spoken about.
So apparently they don't care about people's hurt feelings, which is nice to know, isn't it?
Well, I think they will care about people's hurt feelings when those people get down the ballot box. It's all very well. They may try to tough this one out, but Keir Starmer very clearly said that this was a far right bandwagon that people were jumping on. People calling for an inquiry into this issue were jumping on a far right bandwagon. He said that in the speech on camera. The clip, we've all seen the clip.
Yeah.
We'll see it again a lot today, I suspect. We'll hear about it in the House of Commons when he stands up, when Yvette Cooper stands up later to give a statement on this inquiry. He says, I was talking about politicians, I wasn't talking about voters, but people heard it, how the people heard it. So, look, of course, Rachel Reeves is right. The most important thing is the victims, and that's why we need to have this inquiry. But you can't escape the fact that the government have bungled over this. They have put themselves on the wrong side of public opinion. They put themselves on the wrong side of history, and they only have themselves to blame for that. So the idea that we should suddenly forget what they said in January, I'm getting annoyed now, but the idea that we should magically forget that they have absolutely gone about this cat-handedly, they must have another thing coming, because people won't forget that what he said, and they were upset, and they were hurt, and they were insulted.
Yeah. Absolutely
because they were right.
And you're right to say that we'll be hearing that clip far more today. We've already played it about 8 times. I'm going to play about another 8 times before the end of the show, because we can't let them get away. But we've also got a montage of almost every senior cabinet member saying why we don't need a national inquiry. Because it's not just about taking different advice and learning from your mistakes and saying, OK, we didn't think we needed one then. They were vociferous. They were anti anyone who said that they wanted. You remember Lucy Powell when she accused Tim Montgomery of blowing a dog whistle when he asked about, the Panorama documentary about the grooming gangs and the victims. And it's not just about the victims. It is, of course, about them. But what I think Trevor Phillips was getting at was that the cover-up is also a very important part of this inquiry. We need to know who covered it up, what Labour councillors did what they knew, when they knew it, why the police didn't prosecute, why the police were happy to stand by and let it keep continuing to happen. I think all of those things need to be in there.
Of course they do, and there's no doubt that this has the potential to be very politically painful for the Labour Party, and so that's why people, I think, assume that he was dragging his feet on this. It looks especially bad for Starmer, given that he did prosecute rape gangs. He did put people in prison for this when he was a prosecutor. Yet as soon as he was party leader, it looked like, whether rightly or wrongly, the perception looked like he was trying to continue avoiding scrutiny. And there has been a massive cover-up. This was the majority of Labour-run authorities with simpleton social services who turned a blind eye willfully, or perhaps even just because they were stupid and couldn't see what was happening, or perhaps they were so blinded by their mantra of political correctness and multiculturalism and cultural enrichment that meant that they thought that keeping community tensions down was more important than protecting and branding, young women prostitutes or slags instead of actually victims of child abuse was more important than actually defending them and getting justice for their abuse. And that's gone on for years across multiple parts of Northern England, multiple parts of Labour-run authorities, aided and abetted by multiple police forces. And this inquiry's got to get to all of that. It's got to be televised. It's got to have the same sort of powers that the COVID inquiry had of compelling people to turn up, not just compelling people to turn up, but turning over their emails, their phone records, All of it.
Yeah.
Sunlight is the best disinfectant. It may be expensive. It may take a while, but we have inquiries like this at a drop of a hat. It seems at times. This one, the most important and horrible, horrific blot on our national history, victims and the wider country deserve to get to the absolute bottom of it.
Absolutely right. And just one final one before I let you go, because I know this might be a subject close to your heart. Horse racing faces the axe. They're coming for the online betting. They want to put taxes up. Seemingly senior Labour backbenchers are all for this, but not everybody is. So what's going to happen?
Yeah, it's quite a knotty issue, but there's basically various bands of tax. Various bands of taxes for so online gaming is taxed at a slightly higher rate than if you go down the bookies and have a flutter on the dogs, right. Or if you put a bet on or at a horse at a racing meeting, but rather than online. Now, obviously, the Treasury in that classic way, they're looking at two things. One, they don't like multiple bands of tax. They want to sort of harmonise everything, and obviously, when you harmonise stuff, you never tend to actually they never seem to harmonise it at the lower level, do they?
Funny that.
And the racing industry, which is already suffering from various sort of funding crises, from various gambling reforms that have seen attendance slump, they've seen betting slump. And look, yes, betting is fun. Yep, that people do, but it also is the lifeblood of this industry. It's already suffering. It's already on very low margins. If you make it even harder to bet or even more expensive to bet, that money will directly stop, going directly into the industry that's already suffering. So, yet again, I can see another sort of it's a classic thing of the Treasury not thinking beyond their ledger and tidying up their numbers and having a direct effect on a beloved British industry. I mean, we've seen it with the farmers, we've seen it with the pasties, we see it every time. Winter fuel payments, another classic example. The Treasury hated those things. They don't like those sort of universal handouts. Yet the politics of this is much more dangerous than the government.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to see you, Harry. Thank you very much indeed. Harry Cole, the editor-at-large at The Sun, with a great column on page 10. He also questions whether Kemi Badenoch and the skids may well be something that come together fairly soon. Also saying Peter Mandelson proving to be a big hit in Washington. But while we're looking at The Sun, let's have a look at what they've got on their letters page. And today, and not surprisingly, the big story is the rape gang U-turn. Rapes probe long overdue, according to Simon Lewis from East Yorkshire. At last, Sir Keir Starmer has done the right thing and ordered a national inquiry into the evil grooming gangs. Rattled by the success of reform, he has now done another U-turn. The man shows no leadership, no spine and no moral compass. And Nigel in Romford in East London says, instead of waiting till the public just wouldn't let go to U-turn on a grooming gangs inquiry, Labour should have tried achieving something from the start. Can we now have a bash at stopping the small boats too? Well, a chance would be a fine thing, because don't forget 1,500 people have now come over in the past few days alone, boosting the numbers to very close on 40,000 since Labour got in almost a year ago. It is an extraordinary state of affairs. It is still the biggest problem facing Britain, immigration, 39,559. There's the number there. Let's get a voice note from Tony.
Morning, Mike. Tony from Newcastle. On the rape gangs, I just want to say that I'm sick of hearing about Starmer's minions, because that's all they are, minions, coming out with the line, well, he was the first one to bring a public prosecution when he was... Yeah, that's like me saying I spotted the first bald tyre on my car, but did nothing about the other four. Doesn't make me a hero, it makes me complicit. We need to get this into their thick heads. I don't think they can, though. Anyway, keep up the good work. Bye.
Tony, thank you very much indeed. Nice to hear from you. Morning, Mike. Alan from Ayrshire here. He says Israel won't inform the UK government about anything anymore, as I'm sure they think that they would have briefed Iran about the attack. I honestly can't believe I'm saying this as an ex-member of the British forces. How far have we fallen? And Steve in Cambridge says that video of Sir Starling walking around with all his people around him reminds me of a mushroom hunt, but it's the British people who are treated like mushrooms, kept in the dark and fed BS. Excellent show, as usual. Thank you, Steve, very much indeed. We've got loads more coming up. Coming up next, we're going to be talking to Alp Mehmet, chairman of Migration Watch, about the numbers, why they're going up and why the French are not helping.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:38. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. Peter Cardwell is in for Julie Hartley-Brewer. Peter Cardwell, of course, is the tech minister, science minister, who's been accused of all sorts of things over the course of time as well. Andrew Telsford says, when discussing the National Inquiry U-turn, please remind your listeners and viewers that not a single Labour MP had the moral courage to vote in favour of an inquiry. Shame on them. Well, that's exactly right, because what happened, Andrew, was that they were whipped by the Whip's office, by the Labour Party, by the Labour government, to absolutely and utterly stand as one and vote with the government, which was to have no national inquiry at all. Stuart says, flip-flop Starmer has now reached new levels of flip-flopping, and no wonder the Israeli government did not bother to tell him they were going to attack Iran, because he's just a complete and utter idiot. I mean, that is the problem, isn't it? It's not great when we are now sitting as one of the G7 countries, not trusted enough to be told about Israel's plans to attack their neighbour in the Middle East, Iran, because they weren't sure if we'd actually do the right thing and keep it a secret. That is staggering. Alp Mehmet's here, chairman of Migration Watch, with the news, of course, that 919 migrants crossed the Channel in 14 boats just on Friday alone, pushing the total for the year to just over 16,000, 1,500 over the course of the weekend. So we're nearly at 40,000 since Labour got in. Alp, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Apparently, Keir Starmer's upset that the French are not doing enough, but he doesn't quite say it. He says that, you know, they're working together to make sure that nobody makes that crossing. But it doesn't seem to be working, and it's going to get worse, isn't it, over the course of the next few weeks as the weather improves?
Well, I recall saying it's going to get worse 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And the reason is that people will come over because illegally in small boats because it works. They know that they're not going to be removed. And each time you hear the Prime Minister come up with something about cracking down, about waving his finger at the French, you know for sure that things are not going the way that they would like them, and they know they're not going to go the way that they want them to go. Numbers will keep going up until when they arrive, we detain them, we deal with them quickly and remove them. Until that happens, then the numbers will keep going up. And the French, they've got enough on their hands with the illegal population in their country. They're not going to do anything about it if they can possibly avoid it.
No. And when you see, for example, people like Darren Jones appearing on Newsnight and Question Time and basically telling a story which is wrong, which is fake, where he's made out that, you know, most of the people coming on these boats are women and children. He now says, oh, that was because I made a mistake because I actually saw these boats with women and children in them when I went down to Dover. You can tell that the narrative inside of the government is still that we don't want to stop them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They can't. Even if they wanted to, they can't. And everything they've done so far just it makes that crystal clear that they can't do it, and they don't want to do what is necessary, which is to do what I said earlier about detaining. In order to do that and remove people, we've got to make clear that the ECHR is something that we're going to withdraw from. We've also got to make clear that the Human Rights Act is going to be repealed and something else put in its place, and that we're actually going to do what we say. Otherwise, this year, I'm pretty confident that we're going to end up with over 50,000 that we know about. Coming across in small boats. That's not acceptable.
That's not acceptable, and there's no chance that you'd be wrong about that. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I was predicting that you might get to 50,000 actually before we get to July the 4th, because at the moment it's tipping up on 40,000, and if the weather stays as calm, I mean, you see that boat there, I mean, it looks like the Serpentine. You know, there's literally no waves whatsoever, and the channel was pretty calm at the weekend. I was down there myself, just off the south coast, and there's no reason why you couldn't get sort of 1,500 to 2,000 coming in the next 2 weeks. There'll be another 4,000.
Indeed, yeah, and it's all of a sudden the weather will change, and you can bet your bottom dollar that there's going to be some deaths as well if the weather suddenly changes and they're out at sea and all of a sudden things go wrong. The other reason that I believe that the government actually is not, they're not really especially keen on doing anything about it, is the sort of evidence and what we hear about what they're going to do to the a detention estate.
Yes.
They're going to expand it. We hear about the money being committed to illegal migrants and asylum seekers. We hear about those that they're going to put in, instead of hotels, they're going to put in private rented accommodation, which in itself is potentially so damaging and makes it so much more difficult for young people actually to go and be able to pay a reasonable rent. It drives it out of their range, and all these things really are what makes me so desperately sad that we've got a government that hasn't got the courage, that hasn't got the nous actually to do what is necessary and make clear that if you come here illegally, you're not going to stay.
Right. And they also have hinted at using, you know, kind of student accommodation stroke, you know, hostel type accommodation, other types of dwellings which might have been used differently before, maybe some barracks that they might take over. Some people have taken that to be an understanding that they might actually, as a government, buy some of these migrant hotels and change the use of them and make them into hostels rather than actual hotels, which I'm not convinced they won't do, to be honest.
Well, I'm not convinced they will do either, if only because it will allow them to say, hey, look, we've taken everyone out of the hotels.
Yeah, and it's marginally cheaper to actually buy the property than it is to keep renting it. I mean, it's just bonkers. Alp, good to talk to you.
Well, it's cheaper in the short run, Mike, but it isn't in the long run. In the long run, it's not only more expensive, it's more damaging.
No, of course.
They've got to get their act together.
Yeah, no, listen, I'm not talking about in the real world of cheaper. I'm talking about in the made-up world of politicians who can say, oh, we've saved some money by doing this. But actually, you know, you won't see how much they've spent to actually buy the property. But listen, Alp, we've got to run. Thank you very much indeed. Alp Mehmet, Chairman of Migration Watch. Let's talk to David, who's in Gloucestershire, wants to say something about the rape gangs. David, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to talk to you. What do you want to say?
Well, I was just thinking about the way the post office scandal, the post office inquiry went.
Yes.
When they thought it was a Tory problem, the Labour Party were all behind it. Oh, let's get on and give them compensation and blah, blah, blah. Then we've since heard how the post office victims have been treated and their compensation has been cut to diddly squat and thrown out and blah, blah, blah. So do you really think that Labour are going to treat the victims of the rape gangs with the same distinction? I should think not. I think they're going to treat them with absolute... They'll put an inquiry on and then throw them out to the dust, quite frankly.
Yeah, there's not a great deal of confidence in anything they do at the moment, David, is there? Thank you very much indeed. This from somebody who wants to remain anonymous. He says, I felt the need to send this. I'm a victim not of the rape gangs, but of a circle of 4 paedophiles who basically stole 35 years of my life until I accepted what happened in my middle 40s. I find what he is doing is disgusting, and all this pathetic joke he can do is flip-flop. I'm a little bit annoyed that you only ever say it's girls that are and were abused, but let me tell you, us males have not been excluded from these gangs either. Well, thank you very much indeed for that. Remaining anonymous, obviously I don't want to mention your name, but clearly there is an awful lot once you lift up the ghastly stone under which all of this stuff lives. You will find some pretty disgusting and horrible things, and I think you'll find some pretty disgusting and horrible people, and many of those disgusting and horrible people will be in positions of power and will have been in positions of power and could have done something about what they saw going on around them. Some of them might even have been complicit in taking part in what was going on around them, and that's what the inquiry needs to uncover. That's the cover-up that people want to see busted wide open. What we don't want to see is mealy-mouthed politicians coming on television time after time after time to talk about how important the victims are, when back in January they weren't important. So what changed? 8:47.
Trooping the Colour is happening at the moment. This is the parade being held to mark the King's official birthday. He is 76, of course, and this is the official celebration. I mean, it is just what Britain does best, really. This is down at Horse Guards, which is in the centre of Westminster in London. And Debbie's been in touch on Trooping the Colour. She says, I was half expecting you to show a trans rights rainbow protest. No, not on this network, Debbie, but yes, beautiful scenes there of our brave servicemen and women doing an amazing ceremonial duty for the King.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:50. I'm Mike Graham with you, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock. Peter Cardwell sitting in for Julie Hartley-Brewer this morning. He's here all the way through till 1 as well. Got this from Neil. It says, morning, Mike. Rumour has it that Kia may be recalling their 2024 Starmer model as it keeps making intermittent whining noises, constantly veers towards Europe, makes unexpected U-turns, and only seems to work in other countries. Buyer's regret, anyone? Very good. I like what you did there, Neil. Thank you very much indeed. Speaking of cars and driving, let's talk to Mr. Pothole. Mark Morell is here, Pothole campaigner, of course. He's finally had enough, and he's talking about suing all sorts of people for not doing their jobs, right? Basically, Oxfordshire Council have been told to get a road fixed or end up going to court. Mark, a very good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to see you, sir. What's the latest then? Are you taking the fight to them?
Yeah, well, I've done the campaigning. You know, I set up National Pothole Day over 10 years ago. It's been fairly successful.
Yeah.
And you can keep campaigning and complaining. So today is National Raw Day, Resurface Our Awful Roads Day.
All right.
So I have got all of the templates for letters and the procedure. It's fairly simple to do. If your viewers and listeners want to find a particularly bad road, it's not for a road that's got the odd pothole in, it's one that's particularly bad and technically out of repair, then I'll help them and guide them to issue notices and take legal action against their highways authority.
Yes.
And today, live here, I'm going to announce the first one is going to be National Highways. I'm going to be sending a formal complaint to the Chief Executive of National Highways for a trunk road on the A43 near me, followed by West Northamptonshire Council for a road that's in appalling condition through a village and dangerous defects, potholes and loss of wearing surface on bends through a national speed limit road. And if they don't come back to my satisfaction within 28 days, then I will issue the legal notices formally to them and follow it through.
Right.
So here's a start. Oxfordshire on warning because there was I was contacted by some people there that need some advice, some elderly people. They don't want to take the fight, and I fully understand that, but I will be doing it also. I would love all the groups on Facebook that I've sent information over the weekend, over 30 local groups that are campaigning across the country. I would love for all of them to start issuing legal notices. So I will help them. I can't do it all on my own, Mike, because of my personal situation, but this is a soft launch of the first ever National Raw Day. So let's use the law that they use to get out of paying claims to make them actually resurface our roads properly. Then that might put pressure on Kia, you know, so he can get his car in gear.
Yeah, well, wasn't he supposed to be collecting a load of data and setting out to kind of repair roads at a rate of knots? I mean, I have noticed some roads getting repaired quicker than they were, but there's still plenty of problems. I presume you've taken lots of legal advice on this. I mean, how sort of sturdy could your claim be?
Well, it's quite a simple process because it's fantastic, but it only applies in England and Wales, where the member of public's got the right to do so. It only actually costs you money when you go to stage 2, when you go to the magistrates' court, but it's not a lot of money. I mean, it's only a couple of £100. But if you collect the evidence, the last thing a highways authority want to do is get a court ruling against them because it creates a precedent. So, yes, legal advice. I got good legal advice, and I've got some good a good network of people across the country, from highways engineers that have retired and also legal people. So I can back up and prove that these roads are out of repair. I would not push one that I don't think would meet the test. But having successfully used it before myself, I think it needs to go on a national scale.
No.
But obviously, resurfacing our roads, Mike, that's got to happen. And there is money. Government wastes billions on stuff that they shouldn't be spending money on, and authorities. That's going to all come out over the next couple of years. And good thing is, lack of funds is not a legal defence for not maintaining a public highway. So you've got to find the money from somewhere. So that's your problem. It ain't my problem.
I'm
sure you haven't got the money.
And I'm sure, as you say, there'll be plenty of people in certain councils, particularly those run by Reform now, where they're going to find all sorts of horrible stories about what was wasted and what was spent on things when it should have been spent on the roads. Do they have to have been in a state of disrepair for a period of time before you can go after them?
Well, no, the term is out of repair. So would the average person say this road is in good repair? So as I said, it's not for the odd few potholes. It's normally where the ones I've chosen, where they've been reported, and a complete lack of action. I've actually got a copy of their records and details and screenshots. But as I said, it's not that difficult. It's a bit onerous when you think about legal proceedings. But I can advise people and give them help. I've got the templates. So if they want to contact me through social media, I'm on X and I'm on Facebook and things. So I'm more than willing to advise and help them. If they want to send me pictures and details, I can say whether it's worthwhile going ahead or not. Okay. And if they do go ahead, then I'm more than willing to stand up and be counted, because, something's got to change. I mean, I've got limited time because of sort of support my wife, but, I appreciate it. Yeah. But in the meantime, there are other things that, ideally resurface all of our roads. But I did mention to you the other week about that road patch thing, that looks very promising. I think it's either been certified or about to be certified using our roads. And I'm really planning to push to get some tests done in the UK on it. It's been used in America quite well. And I can see some real potential, and I can see some local initiatives that could be used for this product, which is quite exciting if it transpires to be as good as it's projected. But I'm a great believer in try things different, try things new, because doing the same thing the same way and getting a bad result is just madness.
Yeah, absolutely right. Couldn't agree more. Mark, Mr. Pothole Morell, thank you very much indeed. If you want to get in touch with him, he is Mr. Pothole. You find him on Facebook, you find him on X. He's just right out there waiting for you to get his advice on whatever it is you want to do. Maybe taking the council to court. Kevin's in North Yorkshire, wants to talk about this grooming gang inquiry. Kevin, very good morning to you.
Good morning, sir. Yeah, I just wanted to basically say I think way it will pan out is they will do what they've done with the COVID inquiry. They'll formulate a system of how it will be formatted, and they'll make sure that it doesn't ask the questions that need to be asked. I think that's how it will happen. They've had time to think about it. They know the public pressure's there. They know the reasons why they didn't want it. We all know the reasons they didn't want it. They didn't want it because of the demographic that it would affect. They didn't want it because of the councils that have been the main reason for it, have been Labour councils. And they'll do everything they can to try and stifle it and make it just like the COVID inquiry.
Yes. I mean, there's always that chance, but I think we have to hold into account, Kevin. Since we've got them this far, we've managed to get a U-turn out of Keir Starmer. Heaven forbid it actually works out well. But I think there's a chance that we can make it work out well, because he's showing himself now to be a man who's so desperate to cling on to power that he's willing to start changing his views. And so, I mean, at least he's now doing it,
Well, he is, but I think they've got so much to lose from this one. They've been so out of touch with it and so wrong.
Yes.
That I think they know they've had to do something, but they know the cost of it would be immense if the truth came out. Yeah. It would be immense.
Yes, and I don't think they can avoid it now. They've opened the gate, and the horse is bolted. So now we just have to make sure we lead the horse to the drink, I guess, and that's enough of the analogies. But you know what I mean, Kevin. Good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Let's get a voice note from Tom.
Hi, Mike. This is Tom from Rugby. Concerning this review into the rape case scandal, I think we had to be very careful as to the terms of references. Think back to the Hallett inquiry into the COVID debacle. The clever civil servant set up the terms of references so carefully that absolutely none of the right questions are being asked and are being disallowed. and the whole thing is a complete waste of money. We have to be sure that this inquiry doesn't go the same way.
Well, let's hope that that's the absolute case, and we do keep our eyes on it. You know, we've got them this far, and I think we keep pushing it. One from Malcolm in Hampshire. Good morning, Mike. Thanks for the show. Rape and torture gangs, national inquiry. Because of the scope and scale of this monstrous networked crime, with allegations of enabling by local politicians, local authority, social services, police, judiciary, the response needs to be upscaled to a task force with statutory powers. Those found complicit would need to be arrested and charged accordingly. Yeah, I think that's absolutely where we are. And Michelle says, Mike, gaslighting is actually coercive control and is in fact a criminal offence. Can the public unite together and bring charges against this government? It's an interesting thought. Coming up in the next hour, Chris Philp joins us, Shadow Home Secretary. Annabel Denham's here as well, Deputy Comment Editor of The Telegraph. We'll bring more of your calls as well. Kizzy Schofield is here on the Trooping of the Colour and the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. And Alan Miller talking about the nation and the state of our money, because apparently some of it might be getting nicked by the government. This is Talk, back after the news.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. The best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips in Leeds, it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12.60. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 9. It's Monday the 16th of June. We are back at it here at Morning Glory. Don't forget there's a podcast that comes out about 15 minutes after every show. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory every single weekday morning from 6 until 10. We've been here since 6 o'clock. We've been talking about a great many things, including the latest news coming in from the Middle East, where Iran and Israel are still embroiled in what can only be described as this tit-for-tat war. Missiles being fired by the hundreds into Israel, some of them getting through the Iron Dome defence mechanism. Israel still targeting military sites in Iran. The belief overnight is that they may have taken out or killed the chief of Iran's intelligence network, and also, according to the Daily Telegraph, news that Donald Trump vetoed the possibility of the supreme leader of Iran being assassinated by Israeli forces. Also, of course, a very big story this morning, the U-turn that has been committed by the Labour government and by Keir Starmer in particular, the man who once said this about a national inquiry.
Calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right. Then that affects politics, because a robust debate can only be based on the true facts.
Yeah, not just a bandwagon of the right wing, not just a bandwagon of the Conservative Party, not just a bandwagon of reform, but a bandwagon of the far right. And guess what? Now, apparently, he doesn't think that anymore, because now it's all about the victims of these awful rape gangs, and now he wants to have a national inquiry. Why? Because he appointed somebody to look into the whole thing, hoping that they would come back and bury it under a big stone and say, nothing to see here, no need to have another inquiry, because we've had an inquiry before. We dealt with all that. We don't need to do it anymore because we know that we just have to implement the last inquiry. There's no need to have an inquiry. Now, Keir Starmer goes, oh yeah, I think now we're going to have an inquiry. And now he's gone to Canada to look at some mountains. Oh, by the way, he's also there for a G7 meeting too. 0344 499 1000, front page of The Sun. Also, a fascinating story about bullying at the BBC. Apparently, BBC Breakfast is full of bullies. They all go around shouting at each other and not speaking to each other. Apparently, Naga Chetty and Charlie State have fallen out some time ago, so they basically don't talk to each other. Richard Frediani, who's their boss, has been accused of tyrannical behaviour. Apparently, he didn't like something that somebody did, so he grabbed some woman and started shaking her like this. I mean, you can't do that, matey. For heaven's sake, as I said, here at Morning Glory, it's all sweetness and light. We don't ever attack each other. We certainly don't ever shout at one another. We certainly don't shake anybody just because something goes a bit wrong. You know, that's what happens in broadcasting once in a while. You know, sometimes mistakes get made. You don't start shouting at people trying to get them fired. I mean, that doesn't happen at all. Not here at Talk, anyway. Well, not as far as I know, that's for sure. Coming up, we've got loads to do. Chris Philp is here, Shadow Home Secretary. He's got some things to say. He's, of course, not any longer on a far-right bandwagon, so he must be pleased. 6 minutes past 9. This is Morning Glory. Let us get it on. Chris Philp, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good. Congratulations, by the way, for no longer being part of a far-right bandwagon.
Yeah, well, I'm pleased to hear the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has finally, after 6 months, decided it's no longer far right to want an inquiry. I think it was pretty disgraceful when he smeared me and other campaigners back in January, saying it was far right to want an inquiry, and now magically, all of a sudden, he's decided to have one after all. And by the way, of course, that's not because he believes in it or because he really wants to do it. He has been dragged here, kicking and screaming, forced to do this partly by the Casey report due out today, but also by the vote that we have scheduled in Parliament on Wednesday, and magically, all of a sudden, 48 hours before that vote, he suddenly changes his mind. Well, I think, first of all, Keir Starmer should apologise for smearing campaigners like me as far-right for calling for this inquiry. He can start by apologising, and then we need to make sure those accountable, those responsible rather, for covering up these disgusting crimes, simply because the perpetrators were mainly of Pakistani origin. They covered it up for that reason, and those who did that should be held to account and, in my view, prosecuted for the offence of misconduct in public office. And those people who covered this up, senior police officers in some cases, local council leaders, leaders of social services, they should be prosecuted and imprisoned for deliberately covering up these disgusting crimes because they cared more about so-called race or community relations than they did about protecting vulnerable young girls.
Yeah. The thing that nobody's ever explained, Chris, for me, is why would anybody, whether they're Labour, Tory or Lib Dem or any other political persuasion, why would they think that by outing criminal behaviour that that's somehow bad for community relations? Surely everybody in any community would want to get rid of criminals, wouldn't they?
Well, I would have thought so, and it does baffle me. But the fact is that over many, many years, lots and lots of people in authority, senior police officers, local council leaders, councillors, and people running social services did deliberately cover this up. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't just they didn't look into it properly. They deliberately and actively decided to cover it up. Even the former chair, or the then chair of the Parliamentary Labour Party, actually warned a then Labour MP called Simon Danchuk, who was trying to raise this issue. Yeah. He said, drop it, don't investigate, don't look into this any further, don't raise it, because the Labour Party want votes from those particular Pakistani origin communities. And Simon Danchuk has spoken about that subsequently. So that gives you a little insight into the way these people were thinking. But it wasn't just one or two, it was dozens, maybe hundreds of people who should have been investigating this, but instead they deliberately decided to cover it up.
Yeah. Well, it won't come as any great surprise, and you may have seen this already, but Rachel Reeves apparently doesn't feel the necessity to apologise. This is what she said to Trevor Phillips yesterday.
Quoting here, and misinformation, and those who were more or less accused of racism for raising this issue?
The most important thing is getting
well,
justice.
No, this is what I've asked you is the most important thing.
Oh, no, Trevor.
For many people who were criticised in that way.
Trevor, what is the most important thing?
Of course, it's the position of the victims. I understand that.
It is the victims, and it's not people's hurt feelings about how they've been spoken about.
So she calls what you're complaining about, Chris, hurt feelings. It's not about hurt feelings, is it?
No, it's not. I mean, Rachel Reeves, as usual, is completely wrong about this. This is about leadership, because the Prime Minister, as, you know, the leader of the country, sets an example. He sets the tone, or she sets the tone, right? And it was this sort of attitude saying, oh, it's far right to raise this issue. That is exactly the attitude which led to the cover-up in the first place. Leadership matters, and Keir Starmer has once again completely failed to show leadership on this issue by smearing people as far right when this issue came up. And by doing that, he was perpetuating the very culture that enabled this cover-up in the first place. He was participating in the cover-up by what he said. That is not about hurt feelings. It's about leadership. It's about getting to the truth. It's about convicting the perpetrators. And it's about holding to account those who deliberately covered this up. And Keir Starmer failed on all of those counts in the way that he responded to this in early January, and that is why he should be apologising.
Yeah, and meanwhile he's over in Canada at the G7. He seems to be going cap in hand to the French once again, Emmanuel Macron, to whom has already given 480 million quid. But nothing's happening, nothing's working. The French police are not doing what he said they would do, which is to go into the water in France to arrest these migrants, right? Meanwhile, 1,500 more came at the weekend. You know, it's going to be close to 40,000 any minute now. And he doesn't seem to have a clue what to do.
Well, he's weak and he's spineless, and that is why this year so far has been the worst year in history for illegal immigrants crossing the Channel. He should be saying to the French that they need to actually stop these illegal immigrants, both on the beaches and at sea. We're paying them, as you say, almost £500 million for this. And Starmer should be saying he's going to suspend his terrible 12-year fishing deal, which the French care about a lot, until such time as the French actually stop these boats. And by the way, any illegal immigrant that makes it to these shores should be immediately and without judicial process removed to a location outside of Europe. Doesn't matter whether it's Rwanda or somewhere else. And if every single illegal immigrant who arrives is rapidly removed, pretty soon they will stop bothering to come in the first place. Australia did something similar about 10 years ago, and within a small number of months that worked, and the illegal boat crossings towards Australia stopped entirely. But I'm afraid to say we've got a weak Prime Minister, a weak Home Secretary, and they're not prepared to do any of those things. And that is why this year so far has been the worst ever for illegal immigrants crossing the Channel, almost all of whom, by the way, are young men, contrary to what Darren Jones absurdly claimed and untruthfully claimed last week. They're almost entirely or mostly young men.
Yes, I know. I mean, the lies just keep on coming. You can't really keep up with them. There's so many of them. Chris, great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Chris Philp, MP, Shadow Home Secretary, of course, absolutely spitting feathers there about how he was more or less accused of being a far-right activist of one kind or another back in January because he wanted to have a national inquiry into the rape gangs. And apparently now you're not far-right anymore, if you want that. You're Keir Starmer. It's unbelievable, isn't it? Annabelle Denham's here, Deputy Commentator for The Telegraph. Annabelle, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Chris Philp just there mentioned the Darren Jones scenario when he lied about the fact that, as far as he was concerned, it was all women and children coming over on the small boats. You know, we've got Keir Starmer now basically saying that it's a good idea to have a national inquiry that he didn't think was a good idea back in January. We've got Rachel Reeves saying that we don't think we'll apologise to people for having hurt feelings. Well, isn't it interesting that, you know, some people's hurt feelings are more important than others' hurt feelings?
Well, absolutely. The left are obsessed with hurt feelings when it comes to the right not to be offended and policing speech on social media. And yet suddenly Rachel Reeves is now saying it's all about the victims and it's not about offending people, it's all about hurting their feelings. So there's quite the volte-face there, and I suspect it's the first of many, Mike. For years, the left have attempted to gaslight us over illegal migration. You know, Darren Jones, the apotheosis of that last week on Question Time, but it's been going on for years and years, and people can see, they can see that those crossing the channel are overwhelmingly young men. They're not women and babies and children. And it doesn't just apply to illegal migration, but mass legal migration as well. For a very long time, we were told that it was very good news for our economy to have very high numbers of people coming from overseas to live here and to work here. And that's certainly true for some of the people who come here. But the post-Brexit visa regime didn't really discriminate effectively enough, such that we had very large numbers of low-skilled migrants coming here, as well as dependents, those who weren't planning on working at all. And we're beginning to see the impact that that's having on not just our economy, but also on our society as well. And I just sense now that we're at the start of the foothills of some almighty backlash. And I do feel gradually as though the realm, the field of acceptable speech is widening, that people who previously wouldn't have dreamed of sticking their head above the parapet and saying, yes, immigration has brought many benefits to this country, but actually it's come with some costs as well. Now people are starting to feel that they can say those things and hopefully not be labelled racist in response.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, I mean, I've been saying them with impunity for some time because, people tend not to criticise me very much. I mean, they just assume I'm a right-wing bigot, but obviously I'm not, because now Keir Starmer agrees with me, so I must be just a normal guy, just like him, just a father, who wants to see everything well done in the world. And he's gone off to Canada for the G7 meeting, which seems like the wrong place to be right now, quite frankly, because if you're not talking about solving the problems in Israel and Iran, and you're not here talking about the grooming scandal, then what on earth are you talking about? Because it turns out that this Casey review and the Casey report is more than likely to include a very close connection between the illegal migration problem, the numbers of young men coming here, and sexual assaults, as well as the grooming gang problem as well.
Well, yes, this is the big question, is why did Keir Starmer, who previously accused people of jumping on a far-right bandwagon and when they were calling for a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal, why is it that he suddenly changed his mind? Now, it may have something to do with the fact that his approval rating has plummeted since before the general election. It might be because he's just so worried that he's so deeply unpopular that it is becoming government by poll. If it's popular with the public, then Keir Starmer will initiate it. Whatever it is, the pressure has become so great. It may well also actually be the results of the Casey review, which is going to be published later on today. Obviously, the problem for Keir Starmer, as with all of his U-turns, is that it looks as though he's been dragged here kicking and screaming. It's not something that he wants, but it's something he feels he's under too much pressure to bring in. But ultimately, Mike, we need answers. We need names. We need to be much more honest in our society about the impact of mass migration, of illegal immigration, of importing large numbers of people from, and I quote Kemi Badenoch here, perhaps less valid cultures. And really why it was that so many people across so many of our authorities let these girls down. Why did nobody feel that they were able to whistleblow? Why did nobody feel that they were able to speak up when these concerns were presented to them? So all of this needs to be uncovered, because the real danger is that this sort of thing is still going on. Right. And if we don't have a national inquiry into abuse scandals perpetrated predominantly by Pakistani men, then the young girls are going to continue to be abused, and none of us should want to even countenance that idea.
No, of course. And I mean, I was speaking to Harry Cole at The Sun earlier on today on the show, and he was saying, it needs to be the inquiry needs to be organised properly. It needs to be run by somebody who has got the wherewithal, both intellectually and legally, to put pressure on people. Somebody who can actually, master what is going on very quickly. The thing needs to be televised. It needs to be quick, and it needs to get to the heart of the cover-up more than it does just give justice to the victims.
Unfortunately, however, Britain does not have a long history of quick inquiries.
No.
Look at the COVID inquiry, for instance, which is going to cost hundreds of millions of pounds and drag on for years and years. You're absolutely right that we need this inquiry to be as quick as possible and hopefully not cost hundreds of millions of pounds, and ask all of the right questions, which of course the COVID inquiry isn't. It's not really asking the most important question of all, which is, were the lockdowns worth it, looking at the catastrophic impact they've had on our economy and on our society ever since. But yes, speed will be absolutely key in order that we can mitigate the dangers of this sort of thing occurring again, and that hopefully there can just be, at a societal level, a complete rethink of our attitudes towards immigration, but also community tensions, which seems to be held above all else. It always seems to be the priority of those in a position of power to maintain good relations between those of different ethnicities, and we all need to be equal under the law. We need a just justice system, and at the moment it doesn't look like that's what we're getting.
No, we got two-tier pretty much everything. And a great story in the Telegraph this morning, Annabelle, page 8, civil servants allowed to spy on bank records. An extraordinary story, but because of a fraud bill currently going through the House of Lords, civil servants, not necessarily particularly high-ranking ones, are going to have the ability to look into your bank account and, if necessary, remove funds if they reasonably believe money is owed. This is all done without any kind of reference to the law, without any kind of court order, and without the bank in question even having to tell you as a customer that the government's looking at your account.
Well, the problem with this, Mike, as with all of these sorts of types of legislation, is in the right hands, it could be potentially quite harmless. It's just about making HMRC more efficient, making sure that people aren't missing some of their tax payments and then maybe faced with a higher bill down the line. But we've got to be deeply sceptical about handing these powers to the wrong people. And, by wrong people, I'm not suggesting that they are in any way malignant actors. But if you just look at what the Conservative government did with vaccine passports and, the fact that they were digital and the fact that they were necessary for us to really participate in our society, it's not inconceivable that we would find ourselves in a similarly Orwellian situation if we had civil servants snooping on our bank accounts. And you have to wonder, Mike, is the civil service going to take on more staff in order to deliver on this? Because the figures have already gone up substantially since before the pandemic. Right. We've now got over 516,000 people working in Whitehall, working for Whitehall, the cost of this is absolutely astronomical. And really what we need is to find ways for the government to be doing less, not forever finding more ways to involve itself in ever-increasing areas of our lives.
Yeah, I mean, it really is like whack-a-mole with the civil service, isn't it? You try and get rid of 500 over there, and then there's sort of 700 grow up over there. It's ridiculous. Annabelle, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Annabelle Denham, Deputy Comment Editor from The Telegraph there, making an awful lot of sense, as usual. Let's get Tim on Labour.
Hi, Mike. Tim in Halifax here. More lies, more U-turns, more gaslighting. It's depressing. This government are just rank amateurs. They have absolutely no clue what they're doing. Just think about this. Cabinet Minister, the only job in the world where you can get the job with no skills, no experience, no qualifications, nothing, but you can still get the job. Absolute shambles. What a bunch of amateurs.
I mean, there's no other job like it, is there? There's no other place in the world where you could just walk into a job and be put in charge of the nation's economy, for example, or put in charge of the country. For heaven's sake, having never done it before. One from Christopher, who says, on the inquiry over the rape gangs, we should expect that many guilty men will be fleeing back to Pakistan before the inquiry starts. I hope the police are watching for this and planning to arrest people before they flee. Very good point. And Judy from Notts says, Keir Starmer is just showing off. Look where I am. I'm in a pretty place and you're not. What a twit. I wonder, does he understand why he's there at the G7? Ray, the inquiry into the wicked grooming gangs. I'm looking forward to hearing Jess Phillips and Lucy Powell's comments now. Yeah, we haven't heard from Jess Phillips for a while, or indeed Lucy Powell. Well, let's find out why. It's 9:23.
I think at the moment the government has been right to send additional assets into that part of the world, so fighter aircraft and the refuelling aircraft that they need, because what Iran has said to date is that the bases that we have over there may, in their opinion, be legitimate targets for them. So we have in Oman, the UAE, and at Akrotiri in Cyprus, important bases there, and it's right that we take those actions as a precautionary measure to defend those.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 26 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 when Peter Cardwell will be here. Val says this from the Isle of Sheppey. I've just seen on our local TV it's Sussex Day today with all sorts of things going on during the week. Do you think the golden couple from Montecito will be paying a royal visit? Well, Val, funnily enough, no, but Kinsey Schofield will be paying a royal visit to this very show coming up from Windsor very shortly. But let's get a voice note from Judith, first of all, on Keir Starmer.
Good morning, Mike. It's Judy from Altos, West Yorkshire. You've got it all wrong with Keir Starmer taking them pictures of the countryside because it's somewhere he likes. He's sending them back home to his wife and saying, look, when I finally hand UK over to EU, they'll let me build an house here and they'll give me a non-job, probably about $500,000 a year. And this is where we'll live. Isn't it beautiful? That's what he's doing. And the grooming gangs. It'll be a whitewash. Either that, he'll not give it a timeline, and it'll go on for, what, 10 years, cost about £500 million, and say nothing. Thank you.
Yeah, Judith, as ever, spot on. Thank you very much indeed. Maybe he's going to emigrate to Canada, where Stuart says, I would say that Mark Carney is about as wanted in Canada as Starmer is in Britain, which is not at all. Somehow they're in power, though. It needs sorting. ASAP. I know. Talk about birds of a feather. He's the only other lefty, apparently, in the G7. That's why they like hanging out together. They went to some a hockey game last night, apparently, in a pub and watched it. Alan Miller's here, co-founder of the Together Declaration. Alan, good to talk to you. Very good morning.
Good morning, Mike.
Lots to talk about this morning. The digital ID business has been ratcheted up again. New inquiry is looking into the potential of new forms of digital ID. But this other story this morning, which I found absolutely staggering, which I didn't know about until now, this fraud bill going through the House of Lords, which is enabling, very possibly, members of the civil service, HMRC in particular, to take money out of your bank account without you even knowing if they think you might owe it to them.
It's remarkable, Mike, this story. We've seen it already with the Department of Work and Pensions and around the questions of benefits. And now we see it extended, being proposed that it's going to be extended with civil servants who, again, are not democratically accountable. We've seen big questions around the civil service doing things regardless of what the elected government says. And we've seen things with an elected government doing all sorts of things already. We've seen the problems with things like the vaccination passports were tried to be imposed and people were very against it. We should remember in this discussion, which has gone on for a long time, Winston Churchill was the first person to say we're not going to have national identity cards. And the British public generally has been really opposed to it for a long time. Right. And now what we're seeing, though, is arguments for convenience and ease and trying to appeal to people who have obviously got very significant concerns, rightly so, about border control, about fraud, and in each area, or about crime, in each area, it's presented in a way that can be really appealing to demographics. So if you're concerned about borders and immigration, then we'll have this, we'll have these identity cards, we'll have in our government digital wallet. Now, the government digital wallet is already being implemented. It's being implemented currently to have all sorts of digital data in there. And within all of this, the idea is that you'll just have this seamless convenience and ease. But aside from things just like data breaches, and there's huge concerns about privacy, tracking, cache, surveillance. We know that the questions around central bank digital currency that are constantly being promoted, the EU's got one coming, 27 other nations have. The concerns around, so basically what we're saying at Together is that we're saying that we need to have a digital bill of rights. We need to have a situation where we have protections, ring fencing, areas of privacy, to not have constant surveillance of citizens, to not have citizens, banks becoming spying attributes for civil servants or the government, to make sure that we have accountability and transparency. In the same way, if people wanted to do a wiretap, a phone tapping, or to read your mail, they'd have to get a proper warrant and ensure that. And not to just have constant surveillance, facial recognition everywhere, and all alongside a discussion around biometrics, which very quickly can get into a situation, as we've seen, where on the one hand you have data being collected, and on the other hand you have very clear goals. You say, well, you're not allowed to drive in these areas, these are low traffic neighborhoods, and we're going to have these fines. And actually, if you don't recycle your rubbish correctly, not only will you be fined, but we might just take you off right now, take you down a little bit with your carbon footprints not good. We might take you off the grid. The whole fears around a social credit system, about immediate punitive actions. People might think that's slightly alarmist. We've already seen in the last few years how the state can do all sorts of things we've never seen before. And we're saying it's time to really make sure. So there is an opportunity to write to the Home Affairs Committee, who are now having another consultation. It's important, Mike, to know that in 2023, when there was a consultation, we had a lot of people respond. They do these polls where they say, would you like a really convenient thing to go into a pub? And people say yes. They say, oh, look, everyone wants digital ID because they ask it in a certain question. But we actually had a consultation response. The Home Office recognised it. They know that people have got big concerns. So we're saying to people to actually write to our MPs. We'll respond to this Home Affairs Committee consultation and keep making our voices heard. We're going to have much more of this campaign coming through now. But it's really, really important. I know people can get a little weary, but for the public to make their concerns clear with their MP. And we're seeing now, even with Keir Starmer, they do have an impact when people.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, look at what Starmer has U-turned on. He's U-turned on it because he's realised that the people are against it, and he's realised that he needs to find. He can't just be unpopular for the rest of his time. If he wants to be a success, he needs to do what we want him to do. I mean, I had an experience, Alan. I don't know if you listened to it a while ago, where the Dartford crossing, which is of course now a cashless zone, when you pay to go over it, there's a variety of ways of doing it. I had put some money in so that it was there in case I forgot to pay every time I went over it, right? I got a fine a couple of weeks ago because they said, and I rang them up, I said, I thought I had money in the system. And they went, oh, your money's expired. And I went, sorry? What do you mean? And they said, if it's been there for more than a year, they can't apply it to the crossing toll. And I was like, well, where's my money? And they went, well, you'll have to ring up customer services to get it back. And I'm going, so I've actually given you, it's only about 10 or 15 quid. But, you know, this is, and somebody pointed out at that point, they said, this is the problem with just having everything in digital form. You know, if you still had a toll booth there and you could actually physically give the guy £2.50, you wouldn't have any of these problems.
Well, that's true. And also, though, we are very concerned about more and more toll booths, even in our streets all around the country, not just with one particular tunnel, but with the idea that everything's becoming more about being surveyed and paying. So now we're seeing that the London Assembly are discussing bigger vehicles to be charged more. And we're also seeing pay per mile being revisited, which was once presented as some kind of mad bonkers conspiracy. We're seeing that the idea of tracking cars everywhere, tracking people, constant surveillance, constant nudges, where the state increasingly has control in lives. But at the same time, where it does not seem able to implement things around infrastructure and make big projects work, we've got massive issues, Mike, with reservoirs not being built, with water cleanliness, with the energy, as we know, and also. And so the whole idea that the state now encroaches ever more in these areas, we need to enforce some protections. We need to get very clear about the areas that we think should not be under scrutiny. Privacy needs to be maintained and the public arena separated. And it's really about autonomy and freedom to kind of go on the pursuit of our lives without constantly being under surveillance.
And fined every time you turn around. Listen, Alan, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Appreciate it. Alan Miller, co-founder of the Together Declaration. Very concerned about this bill going through about digital ID as data. And, of course, what we mentioned earlier, this fraud bill, which is also going through. We'll revisit that, I think, in the coming days. Morning, Mike, says Sarah. I'm listening to you whilst walking the dog in the beautiful Sussex countryside, which is soon to be covered in solar panels. I'm laughing at your commentary about Two Tiers' latest video in the countryside. Perhaps he's taking the photos to pass on to Millipede as a future green energy site. Anyway, joking aside, I don't get it with these idiotic videos. He wants me to think he's really powerful and important. What an idiot. I mean, that, I'm afraid, seems to be the final line of almost everybody's notes today, almost everybody's texts, tweets, messages. At the end of the day, it's just, what an idiot. Rain in Lincolnshire, Starmer in Canada, any chance they can keep him? We'll pay the Canadians the same as we pay for the Chagos maintenance. Anything, just anything. What's he doing? It's 9:36.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:38. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 when Peter Cardwell will be here. Graham from Manchester says, Mike, if the government decides to delve into my private finances, I will not only sue my bank for letting them, but I will remove all my money and put it in the only safe place there is, under my mattress or out of this country, like all the millionaire entrepreneurs are doing. Absolutely right. And one from Chris, who says, Mike, love the show. Didn't Starmer say country first, party second when he was getting elected? Seems he was putting party first with not doing a national rape inquiry, as it might affect his core voters. I wonder why the change of heart. Well, I mean, I dare say that we can get an explanation for that from all of the various different former Labour Party apparatchiks and cabinet members, because I'm sure they'll tell us why we want to have an inquiry.
Calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right, then that affects politics.
No, the reason we're not doing another national inquiry is because there's already been a national inquiry.
Do you want an inquiry or not?
No, Paul, I'm trying to answer your question, and the answer is no. We don't think another inquiry, after all the many inquiries that we've put victims through, is the way to tackle this.
There has been a huge amount of misinformation this week. Sadly, party political misinformation. It is just wrong.
We've already had a lengthy inquiry, which ended...
Broad inquiry that encompassed some parts of the, some towns, 6 towns, I believe,
50 towns have been blighted by this issue. We don't know if it's still going on now. That inquiry was a much broader inquiry.
So you're right in saying it's broad, but we've got to look at what Professor Jay has said as well, which is that this doesn't need a further inquiry, and actually it's time for action.
Sorry, I think we played the wrong piece of footage there, because that was obviously when they didn't want to have an inquiry. And that was back in January when they all came out, all guns blazing. No, we don't want an inquiry. Don't be so ridiculous. We've already had an inquiry. Why do we want to have another one? No, definitely not. It's not a good idea. We don't want to put the victims through it. That would be wrong. Today, now we want to put the victims through it, because it's all about the victims. Because, of course, that's very, very important. I mean, you can't get away with this, can you? Surely to heavens. Let's talk to Andrew, who's in Hertfordshire. Hello, Andrew.
Good morning, Mike. Cracking show this morning.
Thank you.
This whole thing with the grooming gangs is really bad. It shows him at his worst.
Yeah.
So there was a girl who wrote an article, I think it was in the Mail. She was a victim and she asked for this inquiry.
Yeah.
And no one listened to her. And yet his statement, I listened to her case and I'm going to do it. So that means that he's so far divorced from the common man or woman that he is a real lawyer. He views everybody else as muggles.
It's incredible, isn't it?
It is incredible, but the key thing you've got to focus on is this goes to the core of the Labour Party. They're anti-Semitic and they're riddled with people that covered up child abuse.
Yeah.
So it's nothing about the victims, it's everything about the Labour Party trying to cover up the fact that they are complicit in it.
Yeah. It is shocking.
And it's really deep. And you look at the bloke that went after Leon Britton. Why was he so virulent at that at the time that this was all breaking?
Yeah.
Because they were protecting the Labour Party.
Yeah. And they were very happy to go after not only Leon Britton, but all sorts of other people as well, led by Lord Watson, who's now in the House of Lords, who was Gordon Brown's kind of enforcer, Tom Watson. Shocking state of affairs. Andrew, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Really, really incredible stuff. We'll keep this going all the way through the day, of course, and no doubt all the way through the week. We'll talk to Simon Danchuk maybe tomorrow about it. Kinsey Schofield is here, though. She's in Britain. She's in Windsor. Host of the Kinsey Schofield Unfiltered podcast, of course, and much else besides. Star of Plank of the Week this week. Kinsey, very good morning to you.
I've crawled out of a window twice for you this morning already. I was trying to give you this beautiful shot of Windsor, and it did require me crawling in and out of a window, but unfortunately my internet connection wasn't stable enough. But please know that I can almost smell Prince William. He's that close to me.
Well, I was going to say probably Prince Harry spent quite a lot of time crawling in and out of windows in Windsor when he was coming home late at night and didn't want anyone to know. But less about him. Of course, Father's Day came and went, didn't it, at the weekend? And so we have to talk about the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, don't we?
Well, I just want it to be known, for the record, I'd like to state here and now, first, that I spent Father's Day with King Charles. He was at St. George's Chapel on Sunday morning when I went to church. He was 10 seats away from me. Ooh. So I spent Father's Day with King Charles, and Prince Harry did not.
Yes.
Yeah. Kind of a big deal. Kind of a big deal.
Yet another year goes by, and he's not speaking to him, right?
Right. Well, Meghan did post a video tribute to Prince Harry, because if it's not on Instagram, did it really happen? We did get to see a nice little montage, very bizarre filter. I thought I had 3 pairs of contacts in my eyeballs as I watched it. No mention of Thomas Markle, the man that helped her get to the position she's in today.
Her father.
Her father on Father's Day, but a nice ooey gooey video for Prince Harry.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what he does, really, Prince Harry. He doesn't seem to do much, does he? I mean,
he does look kind of like the man nanny.
Yeah, he really does, doesn't he? He's not, he doesn't appear to have a job, is the problem, isn't it?
I mean, not for Meghan Markle, because all she needs is that title. She's taking that title and she's monetizing it left and right, from restaurants to loose fruit spread. She got exactly what she needed from Prince Harry, his proximity to the British royal family, so that she could try to turn it into her own brand.
Yeah, and I mean, the kids are becoming more and more part of these videos, aren't they, as time goes by? There was a time when they were never in them.
Because Harry told us that they were in jeopardy, that their lives were in jeopardy, and that he recently said he's too afraid to bring his children to Britain. I mean, I'm sitting so close to his father in a church, and you're saying that you're too afraid to bring your children to Britain? It doesn't make any sense. It's one of the safest, loveliest places I've been in quite some time. What an escape for me to be here instead of LA right now. LA, I mean, the apocalypse is happening close to Prince Harry. And the No Kings marches and the destruction happening all over Los Angeles and Southern California. Meanwhile, you guys are celebrating your king. You have Trooping the Color. It's about unity. It's about, being a patriot. It's about loving your country and loving your culture. What a loss for Prince Harry.
I know. He must miss it. I'm sure there must be times when he wakes up in the morning and thinks, crikey, I wish I was back in Windsor, because it is rather a nice part of the world. Meanwhile, apparently they've been firing more of their PR associates and their communications teams. Apparently it's all their fault.
I mean, do they ever take credit for anything that goes wrong? I think it's bad when working for the world's most famous royal escape artists is the one job that everyone wants to escape. I mean, there's no confirmation as to whether they quit or were terminated. A lot of these people leave on their own, but the constant turnover in Harry and Meghan's camp isn't just a PR issue, it's a leadership issue. People don't walk away from jobs that they love. They walk away from dysfunctional situations. I don't think it's a coincidence that they continue to lose these employees. I think it's more of a pattern. That's culture, and culture comes from the top. For Meghan, you can't build an empire when you're burning through your architects. No amount of branded coffee or curated glossy Instagram posts can make the instability behind the scenes irrelevant.
No.
We're keen to it by now.
But also, it's very clear, isn't it, that they just can't get on with people. The number of people, I mean, I imagine the numbers that they have let go in various jobs since they've been together must be up in the sort of 30s or 40s now, mustn't it?
Since they've been together, we're well beyond the 20s. That's certain.
Yeah.
But I do believe that it's a collaboration issue. I think that it's Meghan's way. What Meghan wants, Meghan gets, is the famous line we heard from Prince Harry when he was angry that she wasn't getting the tiara she wanted around the time of their wedding. So I feel like that's still the theme in the house. What Meghan wants, Meghan gets. So if you come to the table and you're an expert on anything, but you don't agree with her, you need to get out of the way.
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely be getting out of the way, a long way out of the way. How long are you here for, and when are you going back?
I was invited to a banquet tonight over here, and so I'll get on a plane tomorrow. I'm staying one extra day so I can wear a pretty dress and go to a ball at a castle.
Fantastic. I mean, what could be better? Perhaps.
Will somebody just marry me so I can live here?
Well, I would, but I'm not very good at being a husband, so I don't think you want that. I'll see if I can find somebody better. Kinsey Schofield, thank you very much indeed. Host of Kinsey Schofield Unfiltered. If you fancy marrying her, she wants to stay in the country. Well, why don't you just send her to France and bring her over on a small boat? Darren Jones will speak for you. Look, there's another woman. She's coming. There, have a look. Dawn says this, Mike, thank you as always for a great show and highlighting so many things. What did you think about the BBC's coverage last night? They did an article on the rape gangs, and of course it was in a girl from London, and they mentioned that she was raped by white men. Funny that they felt they had to say white. No mention of the Pakistani men. No, of course not. It's the BBC. Brad says, talk. We should be suing Starmer for defamation, slander and libel for swearing as all far right. Let's all see him in court. Yeah, don't forget, the BBC got a lot of problems this morning because the reason they can't check into some of the news stories they do is there's too many bullying each other. Front page of The Sun, exclusive. The show, known as Breakfast at BBC, is in crisis, apparently. Naga Manchetti and Charlie State have fallen out. Apparently they don't speak to each other, and their boss, Richard Frediani, has been accused of tyrannical behaviour, including shaking people when he doesn't like what they've done. Is it any wonder that the place is in a complete state of mayhem? Not at all like the sweetness and serenity that surrounds us here at Morning Glory. We'll be back after this.
refusing to watch that film and for being a coward, not, you know, by signing those deportation papers. Greta, you little doom goblin, go straight to hell.
You can't try and snipe at the Conservatives for things that weren't our fault.
Oh, I mean, I
This
haven't
is
got
not one of
time. So tell your big mate Donald Trump to tell his big mate Vladimir Putin to stop killing people, then we can solve that problem like that.
Are you going to be a net contributor to our society? But are you going to better the lives of the people already here?
Won't be surprised to know I disagree.
Why? Why do you disagree, though? Why do you want our young...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. This is, of course, the home of common sense. We are here every single weekday from 6 a.m. Don't forget to join us every morning as early as you can. And the Morning Glory podcast is out around about 10:15. So about 25 minutes from now. We're here until 10. Peter Cardwell's taken over. A bit of breaking news for you, by the way. An Air India Dreamliner Boeing 787-8 has been forced to turn back after a mid-air technical issue. It was flying from Hong Kong to New Delhi, and it's been forced to turn back after the pilot said the jet was facing a technical issue mid-air. The plane returned to its origin of Hong Kong as a precautionary measure. This is according to Reuters. It comes just a few days after, of course, that flight AI-171 to Gatwick, using the same type of Boeing aircraft, crashed in the western Indian city of Ahmedabad, moments after takeoff, killing all but one of the 242 passengers. The one survivor, of course, is in the Sun today, actually talking about how incredible it was that he could see members of his family on Father's Day. Extraordinary, extraordinary. I'd have to say, though, and without wishing to in any way say that there's anything wrong with Air India Dreamliners, because they haven't been grounded. Boeing hasn't said anything. It was the first time there'd been an accident involving one of them. I don't think I'd be getting on one, to be honest. I just don't think I would. Stephen the Wirral says this: prior to any official investigation into the rape gangs and the cover-up by the authorities, an amnesty should be offered to those in authority who inform on their bosses. This will save time and money and get these evil people convicted sooner. Yes, I think you could have a point there, and I think a lot of people would agree. Kevin in Bolton says, potholes. The other week I witnessed a crew filling potholes. There were 3 blokes in a truck who were scanning the road for potholes. When they found one, they would jump out, throw a bit of tarmac in the hole, tap it down and jump back into the truck. The whole process took about 10 minutes, absolutely no quality control. So how long will the repair last? Now that the government are throwing money at the problem, the cowboys will be out to make a killing. Says Kevin. Yeah, I think you're probably right. And how comforting when the UK is going down the tubes, the nuclear war is threatening, and our pathetic excuse of a leader is once again out of the country taking photos of mountains, says Leslie. Yes, I know. It's not ideal, is it? Now, earlier on in the show, we talked to Harry Cole, editor-at-large at The Sun, because his column today is all about the poor judgment of this Prime Minister and his U-turn on the rape gangs.
You look back to 6 months ago, back in January, there was even a vote in the House of Commons that the Labour whipped their MPs against.
Yeah.
Even MPs that are now welcoming the inquiry actually were forced by Labour whips through the division lobbies to vote it down. Mysteriously, Starmer managed to have a diary clash that day, so he didn't make that vote alongside some senior members of his cabinet. It's a classic Starmer, this one, in the fact that lots of people around him, lots of people in government thought there was an inevitability that there was probably going to have to be an inquiry at this point. But instead of getting on the front foot, leaning in, frankly saying, look, I banged up some of these people when I was director of prosecutions. I know about all this, and I think we should have an inquiry. He obfuscated, and he set up a review. He tried to kick it into the long grass, hope it'd all go away. He clearly didn't want to give in to Elon Musk and Reform and the Tories who were pushing for this inquiry. So he sort of dug his heels in, and it's kind of classic that the review has now come back 6 months later and said, you know what, actually we do need an inquiry. And just like he wasn't able to say, the obvious that a woman can't have a penis. Women need women need their own safe spaces protected, like bathrooms. Until a judge had said that in the Supreme Court, Starmer sort of was all over the place on it. And then once a judge said it, he said it. Now he's hiding behind this review that says, yes, we should have we should have an investigation. And lo and behold, here he is saying, oh, now I think we should. So why can't he ever just actually lead and actually see the wood from the trees in front of him and get on the front foot? It's a remarkable trait that he seems to have, that he always ends up looking, whether or not he is, he always makes it look like he's being dragged kicking and screaming. The things he doesn't want to do.
I presume that he set Dame Louise Casey off on the report so that she would come back and say there's no need for a national inquiry. So he's kind of got that wrong as well, because he should have seen that that's what she was going to say.
The idea that in this climate, in this political mood, in this outrage around the country, people are furious about this. The idea that she was going to come back and be, you know what, I'll be Starmer's whipping boy on this. I'll be the woman that says we don't need an inquiry. And when it was so blindingly obvious that we did need an inquiry, just from the facts that were publicly available at the time. So this idea that she's suddenly uncovered some new mystery about the fact that hundreds of Pakistani origin men raped, drugged, abused thousands of British girls. That's not new information. That is enough. There was enough information in the public domain in January to say, why don't we bring this all together for once? Why don't we have this moment of national reckoning about such a big scandal? And the idea that Louise Casey was going to be the human shield for Keir Starmer not to have an inquiry is daft. I suspect she was always going to have to come back and say there would be. So if he thought that was going to make it go away, then he's been hoisted by his own petard.
And today, and not surprisingly, the big story is the rape gang U-turn. Rapes probe long overdue, according to Simon Lewis from East Yorkshire. At last, Sir Keir Starmer has done the right thing and ordered a national inquiry into the evil grooming gangs. Rattled by the success of reform, he has now done another U-turn. The man shows no leadership, no spine and no moral compass. And Nigel in Romford in East London says, instead of waiting till the public just wouldn't let go to U-turn on a grooming gangs inquiry, Labour should have tried achieving something from the start. Well said, indeed. And one final one from Mike in Lincoln before we talk to Peter Cardwell. Morning, Mike. Will prevent me paying the now far-right dog-whistling and trumpet-blowing terrorist Keir Starmer. Now he's organising a national statutory inquiry into the rape gangs on predominantly Pakistani heritage men. Also, will he be sacking Lucy Powell now that he and Baroness Casey have exposed her as a bigot? Well, that's a very good question. Perhaps Peter Cardwell can answer it. Peter, in for Julie Hartley-Brewer this morning. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, hello.
I mean, are people like Lucy Powell going to be chased now by Prevent for saying what they said? Remember the dog whistle?
Well, indeed, that's right.
Tim Montgomery.
And you're far right if you're talking about this. It's such absolute nonsense,
Isn't
Mike.
it?
And we knew this all from the start, and a blind man and a galloping horse knew there should be a national inquiry. There needs to be far more prosecution of people who are involved. I mean, what Chris Philp was saying to you earlier on, I think I absolutely agree with. There needs to be an apology, and then there needs to be action in regard to actually sorting this out. And I wonder whether this inquiry will sort something out. Do you know what? There was someone who contacted me on Twitter yesterday and said, Peter, do you know what? Tell me a national inquiry that's actually solved the problem.
Yeah.
And that's a big point as well.
There hasn't been one, has there? You
It's
really
a
can't
very
think
big
of
point
one.
as well.
And they take a very long time. However, the Times this morning say that there is a way that can be done swiftly, that it can be got, justice could be got for the victims, but also, more importantly for me, is the people who covered it up that we need to find and prosecute.
Well, I'll be getting the perspective of Maggie Oliver in just a second, just after the news. She's a former detective constable at Greater Manchester Police.
That's
of course.